Viewers, there's going to be some drama here. We're going to talk about the circular firing squad surrounding Eliezer Yudkowsky's new book, If Anyone Builds It, Everyone Dies. There's basically no coordination to say, here we are in this community supporting the book launch.
I wish these people really wanted this book to succeed, but it seems like when it comes to their image, they don't want to do that.
Welcome to Doom Debates. My guest today is Holly Elmore. She's the executive director of PauseAI US. She leads protests at AI companies that I've been a part of myself. She leads outreach to policymakers through the PauseAI US organization. And she also has a PhD in evolutionary biology from Harvard University. Holly is a returning champion. Last year, she was here on Doom Debates, and she was debating Greg Tanaka, a Palo Alto city council member, about the SB 1047 bill. Go check out that episode. Today, Holly and I have a lot to talk about. We've been like-minded about a lot of the issues surrounding Eliezer Yudkowsky's new book, If Anyone Builds It, Everyone Dies. And we discussed it last week at the unofficial If Anyone Builds It, Everyone Dies launch party, so you can check that out as well. But I wanted to bring Holly on for a full episode because we have so much to talk about in the aftermath of this book launch. I think she's a great person to compare notes with and just share our opinions about what we think a good launch would look like and how we can do better going forward. Holly Elmore, welcome to Doom Debates.
Thanks for having me back.
All right, Holly, so we've got a lot to talk about. We've been going back and forth on Twitter, having a lot of the same observations and I'm going to say criticisms because there's a lot of stuff that we're not happy about. I think this is going to be a very interesting conversation. So first, we're just going to review the book's main claim, and then we'll talk about people's reaction to the book, essentially reviewing the reviews. And then we're going to talk about something that you might call the circular firing squad, or my new coinage, the crab bucket, which is our kind of critical term for how the rationalist community sometimes reacts to these kind of things. And I think it's really coming to a head this week in the wake of this book launch. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the general challenge of building mutual knowledge when the most informed people are anti-signaling, which I think is also a very timely topic in the wake of Steven Pinker's new book, which is all about mutual knowledge. So wide-ranging discussion, because all of this stuff is all in your mind too, right?
Absolutely. I can't wait. It feels like, normally like doing outreach is like, and explaining about AI danger, like it's work, I'm having to phrase things in a way, really meet the audience. I feel like this is for me, this is my real frustration that I feel every day. And I am really excited to have a chance to take it apart.
Exactly. All right, viewers, there's going to be some drama here. This is going to be a juicy episode. Before we get there, let's just back up, okay? So what would you describe as the book's main claim?
I would say the book's main claim, it's well advertised, is that if anyone builds it, everyone dies. I would say the book's main claim is that not that it's impossible to have aligned superintelligence ever, or that like a utopia is impossible, but that it's not possible given the level of technology we have today. Using current techniques, it's not, if somebody does that, tries to build something that powerful, it's not going to actually be aligned and there will be disaster.
Yeah, I'll read a quote from the book because it summarizes itself very well. It says, building an artificial superintelligence using anything remotely like current techniques, based on anything remotely like the present understanding of AI, will cause human extinction. Yeah, that's the central point.
Yeah, they say extinction. I'm a little more like umbrella, like disaster would be bad too, But they feel pretty confident about extinction with what they said, to our current understanding and our current techniques.
Yeah, so that's the main claim. Viewers, if you haven't gotten the book yet, please order it. Please read it. It's definitely worth your time. It's like 5 hours of reading or audio listening, distilling the last decade or two of Eliezer Yudkowsky and the thinking of people like me in the community. Highly worth your time. I mean, you agree it's worth people's time, right?
Definitely.
Okay.
Well, because people in particular are often very curious about Eliezer, the personality, and this is by far the easiest look into his thinking, I think, for He's got a very particular style, which does still come across in this book, but a lot of people are kind of screened out or like alienated by that style. And he's really made an effort. And Nate Soares is also an author of the book. Yeah, I should give Nate credit, but but Eliezer's like style and his ideas are coming across in his own words, but in a much more accessible way than I think ever before.
Exactly. It's like somebody asked Nate Soares, give me a distilled Eliezer Yudkowsky book without the Eliezer Yudkowsky.
But still with plenty of parables and dialogues and stuff for like
Exactly. And fans still notice the real Eliezer Yudkowsky coming out. I mean, there's plenty of references, like analogies he likes to make, particular anecdotes. So it's not fully Eliezer-less, but if you'd never known about Eliezer Yudkowsky and the Rationalists and you just picked up a copy of this book, I think the reaction you would have is, oh yeah, this belongs in the nonfiction section. This is just like a nice, popular, best-selling book. But it's hitting me with banger after banger, which is rare for a nonfiction book to do.
Yeah, it's definitely, I mean, it's not even, I guess like it should be going for the cadence of like popular science, where you're sort of allowed to make, like if you think about like Neil deGrasse Tyson, like he says a lot of kind of poetic things. Like, could he put that in a scientific paper? No, but he's telling you about the facts and he's
Right.
giving you also, he's like allowed to have that interpretation of the facts. And like Eliezer's very allowed to bring that level of takeaway to an audience. And he just normally does it in a much more idiosyncratic way that was not mass marketable before. And it was really hard for him behind the scenes. Like, I just know it was really hard for him to do that. It's like really difficult for him to like alter his style. He didn't want to feel like he was sacrificing like precision or accuracy at all. And so he was really like, he dug deep to be able to do this, to be accessible and also like keep his standards of honesty to do this, which is why it's particularly shitty that people are like his own community that he built, are being so negative about it. And they're criticizing exactly that thing.
You wanted to add that maybe you have some nitpicks with the degree of risk that it's saying, or how would you finish off?
I like this book. I think it's accessible. It tells one account of AI danger, and it's very, you can hear, Eliezer's voice, the original AI alignment guy who's been saying it for a long time. But it's much more readable for just, any new audience. And I really have very little to say against it. The only thing that I would add, just to like clarify, just, as like a representative of PauseAI, is that like we don't for us, like we don't think it has to be extinction, and we don't think that extinction has to be like almost certain to implement pause as a solution. Like there's lots of negative things that can happen. And so like I think Eliezer and Nate have a very high bar for interfering in society or like regulating. Most people don't have such a high bar, and PauseAI is about just us as the people, like asserting what we want and what we think is good for us. And if we want to be safe, that needs to be taken into the democratic calculus. So I don't want people to get the idea from the book that like you have to think that extinction is certain, like to merit, the solutions that they're talking about. The solutions they're talking about are good for preventing gradual disempowerment, loss of connection between people, a generation that is, emotionally stunted or has their mental illnesses exploited by ChatGPT. I mean, like any concern you have about this technology going too fast, like a pause is meant to address that.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a good distinction on the PauseAI coalition as it compares to the AI extinction level doomer coalition, which I myself am part of. I mean, I'm both, right? I'm both in the PauseAI coalition, and I also think that AI is likely to cause extinction. So if I were to just ask you the book's central claim, if anyone builds it, everyone dies, I know that's a narrower claim than necessary for membership into PauseAI,
Mhm.
but do you think they've made a strong case for that claim?
I think so. I think there is a strong case, and they could have told many other scenarios with like different details that lead to the same conclusion. I think the real point they're trying to make is that like the world is very easy to disrupt in lots of ways that are not obvious, like at our level of capabilities. But if you raise the level of capabilities, there's a lot of unforeseen ways in which that intersects with the current world, and it can just like break our system. And because I believe that that's how the world is, that it is vulnerable to higher capability agents coming in, or not even agents, just, higher capability stuff messing up our equilibria.
So on that note, I hope you don't mind if I ask you,
P-Doom, P-Doom, what's your P-Doom, what's your P-Doom, what's your P-Doom?
Holly Elmore, what's your P-Doom?
Ugh. I don't love this question. It's my pat answer is that it's like 20 to 40% on the worst, and like the variation is like 20% like extinction, and then to like 40% like the worst civilizational tragedies, but not everyone dies. And then I'd put like 40 additional percent into like just bad, like we just have a society we don't really want and we didn't need to do it. And then I would put like maybe 10 to 15% on the top of just we get lucky and we don't die, and then we're also like society's not so bad. So I have kind of a spread of outcomes. I think that just society not being good is plenty of reason to not rush ahead with this technology. And so I
Yes,
won't love the
yeah,
obsession with P-Doom, as a number, but I would so 20 to 40, put me down.
it's like the book talking about everyone dies. Do you think there's like a 20 to 40% chance that by 2050 everyone dies?
I find myself resisting these questions so hard, but I put that closer to like 20.
Okay.
It really varies. Like, I hate how much that's like by my feels, and my feels do like vary every day. And sometimes I can tell my feels have to do with like a Twitter interaction, and like that really shouldn't be determining, like what I think is the likelihood of the technology going bad. And they're always subjective estimates, but sometimes I feel like as low as 5, and then sometimes I feel like as high as 35, like for everyone dies. And it has a lot to do with just to be honest, like subjectively, like I can tell it has a lot to do with like how much I feel I can trust authority figures to take action, and like that swings very wildly. So just upsetting events will often that don't really have to do with like the destructive technology potential of the technology will change it a lot.
Yeah, for me, I don't have a strong opinion. If anybody wants to say 10 to 90%, that's all fine. I mean, fields are going to determine it. I don't claim to have single digit percentage precision. I think no human can calculate probability that precisely. That said, I do think if somebody's feels are like below 10% or especially below 5%, that's mind blowing to me. I just feel like the feels are in the wrong ballpark, right? It's as if somebody said their probability is like 0.05%. It's like, really? Is that really the ballpark that your feels should be outputting numbers in? I don't think so. Okay, so that's your nuanced book review. I'll give my book review. I've never written it down. I want to premiere my book review for the first time here on this episode of Doom Debates. My book review is that there was a space of possible books that I would have really liked to exist. Think about it as like a target with circles inside of circles. I think this book hit quite close to the bullseye, as far as I can tell. But I also think that the target of books that I would have loved is pretty big. So I think this book is just like well within the space of books that I would have loved. I think this book is really great. I think it's much greater than the minimum standard of a book that I'd be really passionate about. So to me, it's like people are asking like, oh, what's your least favorite part about it? And I'm like, I have no idea. It's already like insanely great. And to the extent that I would change it, I would just change it in ways that consequentially become more effective. So if you tell me people would react better if the book were like this, I can't judge whether that's true or not. But if that is true, then sure, I'd want to change it that way. But as far as I can tell from reading the book itself, I don't know a particular modification that I think would make it more likely to be well received or would make the argument more clear. So basically, I think the book is amazing, and I don't feel the need to nitpick, but I also don't have particular nitpicks that come to mind. Like, I think it's like a nice, smooth ride. It's like a nice nonfiction book. I think they're not getting enough praise for this book.
No, I mean, and because there's like a few books or a few resources that kind of hit this mark already. And like with Eliezer's fame and like they are taking, they've created like already, like before it even came out, it was like the premier resource of this type. And that's amazing. I'm really, really happy that they did that. I'm trying to do public communication. This kind of book being out there really fills a gap because people, I don't know, just people look to certain signals of like, is this topic real? Is this topic serious? And like having a real like trade book, that they saw in the New York Times, like existing on the topic, whether they ever crack it open or not, like does immense things for their like belief about where this topic falls, in how much they should care about it, how much like credence they should give it. So like that alone is amazing. It's like not even about the content of the book. And then like the book itself, I think if somebody reads it and they don't know anything about the situation, they'll come away getting it. Like, I mean, I as like a professional in this field, like might have like some additional things to say. And probably just like selfishly, the only thing I would change about the book is that there's a lot of like kind of letting people off the hook for not being early joiners to this cause. Maybe that is effective. Maybe that's, but like we're in the stage right now where we're needing people to join to make the critical mass. And they're kind of like, well, of course it's okay. You don't want to join something that doesn't have a critical mass. Like they say it at a few places, and like their marches or like assurance contracts where they're only going to happen if enough people agree. And like, I would like to emphasize, I guess, like courage and like standing up a little bit more. But like that's just has to do with like me knowing this like arena very intimately.
Here, I think I know one example of what you're talking about. So here's the book's website, ifanyonebuildsit.com, and there's this link here that says March. If anyone builds it, everyone dies. So don't build it. March to Soft Superintelligence in Washington, D.C. Pretty cool looking webpage.
Mm-hmm.
And you can click I pledge to attend. And then I think this is what you're talking about. It says, if 100,000 other people also pledge to march in D.C., I will attend that march.
Yeah.
That's what you're talking about,
And then,
right?
like, it says in the book something like, we believe that a big march is more effective than a small march. And I did, like, a little bit think, like, oh, was that aimed directly at me? Like, it was,
That's right. You are known for having a bunch of small protests that I've
we're
been
doing
part of,
small
to be fair.
protests. And, people are, like, around me or people from the AI safety community literally dead ass, like, many times be like, well, have you ever considered having a big protest? I'm like, how do you think big protests happen? Like, you have to, like, they really, I think that they kind of believe on some level that, like, if I, like, approached it in the coolest way, then, like, it wouldn't be difficult. People wouldn't be going through fear and, like, or that isn't just the process of, like, actually winning converts. Like, that they have to deal with, like, oh, it's not socially safe to have this position because there's not a lot of people in it. Like, them joining is how we get big, and like, I feel like you can't leapfrog that. I don't know. I really hope that this works, like I will pledge to attend, but it does kind of take away from like a personal responsibility, like duty message, which like I do think is important for getting the critical mass at this point. But like,
Fair enough. Yeah, I pledge to
small
attend.
nitpick from also working in AI safety.
I've heard Eliezer a couple times. I think this was in his book, Inadequate Equilibria.
Mhm.
He's expressed appreciation for the social technology of Kickstarter, right? The idea that you first need a bunch of people to conditionally commit, and then it reaches some threshold, and then they all act. So he's trying to use the Kickstarter model
Yeah.
for this protest. But in practice, it's kind of interesting. I feel like Kickstarter, the company, never really used the Kickstarter dynamic that much. Like, it's more like, okay, yeah, here's a webpage where you can just donate and we'll just take any amount, right? I feel like the thresholds never made that much of a difference.
I think it's a fantasy, like in most here. I think that people because they're not the first to talk about assurance contracts for demonstrations. Like, I had a lot of rationalists like tell me that I should do that, and then maybe they would come to a protest, like, if they could be assured that it wasn't cringe, essentially. And like, I don't think that's true. I think if like the reason you're coming is because you have that guarantee, like, you're not like the best recruit, Like, what I want is for people to like believe, like to have conviction behind what they're saying and like represent that at a demonstration. And just getting people to feel like it's popular and safe to come to a protest is like not really demonstrating the like chutzpah that I want,
If you don't like me at my smallest, you shouldn't join me at my biggest.
I feel that way about a lot of these people, honestly. Like, I'll take them. I think like once we are bigger and like once they'll forget all about it. Like, if the way that this goes is that PauseAI keeps getting bigger, we have more buy-in from the public, we have more jobs to offer, like, they're they're going to forget that they ever like ridiculed what we were doing, or that, ever like came up with excuses not to do it, or like, and they're gonna even think that they were like there on the ground floor because they were like aware of it. Like that's just how they're gonna remember it. This is classic. This happens with vegetarianism all the time. People like think they were like big supporters because they knew you, and they forget like that they were like, like giving you a hard time about not eating at dinner, like, and like, so yeah, I think absolutely. I'll take them back. It's a big part of that kind of activism to like be big about it and like take people back and not like rub it in their face that they have amnesia about this. But yeah, it makes me annoyed, and I really wish that they had taken this opportunity to like valorize standing up and doing the right thing, whether it's popular or not. And instead they kind of emphasize that like, oh, of course, like nobody could be expected to do this sucks.
Yeah, exactly. So now we're getting into one of the topics of discussion, which is like we do have some criticisms with how Eliezer and MIRI have approached their PR, which I don't think have to undermine how much we support their book, right? I'm 100% in support of the book. I'm actively working to help the book. But, it's been a week after the book. There's a bunch of drama. I think it's still like fun and interesting to lay some of the drama at the feet of Eliezer and MIRI. So like you're saying, I don't think I agree with you that I don't think that they lionized the act of like doing the early protests as much as you and I would have liked. And furthermore, when
Yeah.
Eliezer did the interview with me, I brought up the question of protesting, and he was really hemming and hawing. He's like, well, my preferred ideal scenario is if the politicians just immediately get the picture. Like that would be the smoothest situation with the least wasted motion, to use one of his terms, to paraphrase. It would be the least wasted motion if our leaders would just get it and take action. But he did reluctantly agree that, like, yes, the world where people protest, that is a useful signal. That's probably good. But it's like, the world where we smoothly get to the end state without the protest, it just seems so unrealistic to me.
Well, he would love to just complain about that the world is not Dathuan or whatever, like, and just like, but yeah, that's a thing that like, I do think Eliezer like has like put in a lot of work, and so I don't want to like really be too hard on him, but I feel like his philosophy on this has really given license to a lot of just kind of like lazy nerds to just like, nah, well, I don't have to do that because that's inelegant. Like they have this instinct that like protesting is cringe, and I don't even know if they can like introspect and know why that is, but they see that like there's few people doing this against like this big building of people, and like they're just yelling. Like, don't they realize like that doesn't do anything? Like, are they stupid? They feel like vulnerable at that whole situation about like being in the small group and caring, like showing that they care, showing that they hold a position strongly, like that all of that makes them feel vulnerable. I have no idea how much real insight they have into that, but they just say like, that's cringe. And then the reason, actually, you are wrong for doing it, or for like pressuring me to do it with your existence, because you make us look cringe. And it's really important that we not look cringe to decision makers.
Right.
Like to AI company execs that we could influence, totally, because we're cool. Like they'll see that we know a lot about ML, and they will have to listen to us. Like once we've shown that we're such excellent scientists, and like, so you're actually detracting from that because you're so uncool. But like, they just feel vulnerable. And like Eliezer really pushes bravery in a lot of other ways, like mostly like being honest. And I think he is brave, but like, so I don't want to like, it feels unfair to be so hard on him because I think he's also done like an incredible amount of good. But like, yeah, he's giving cover to really like very base instincts on this. And I think he should reevaluate like what he considers worthy of honor. Yeah, like it's cringe and embarrassing, and like you don't want to do it, and it's against your like aesthetic of how debate should happen or whatever, but like it doesn't that make it all the more admirable? Like, I mean, especially the people in my protests, like almost all of them come from a background like somewhat influenced by Eliezer, and like they had to go against that in order to do a protest. So like I thought it was even braver.
Yeah,
of
I mean,
them.
to push back a little. I mean, if I putting on my Eliezer and MIRI hat, I think they would say, look, it's not really about our emotions. Like we agree that it's honorable to just go stand there. Especially like the recent people who did the hunger strike, like Guido Reichstatter and Michael Trotzi and a couple other guys. I think Eliezer would agree. Yes, this is honorable and there's a lot of dignity to it. But we at MIRI doing it just in terms of consequentialism and the various impacts of that, it might be net negative, right? I think that's at
Well,
least how
that's a
he would
different
represent the way he's
question.
thinking about it.
Like, whether their organization should do it, is a different question than, like, whether they should be supportive of the idea or, like, and
Sure.
they have never. Yeah, the best I've ever heard is, like, apparently happened in that interview, which, sorry, I haven't watched up, but, is basically like, "Well, like, I have to admit that on my worldview, like, this seems like something good, but it's just so against my aesthetic." And my aesthetic is very close to what I consider, like, morality, about, like, the rationalist ideas about speech and discourse. Like, that's the main sacred thing that they do is speak in a certain way and follow observe very strict rules on how to speak. And they believe that has almost like magical properties that like propagate out, to change people's minds, like because you're like raising the sanity waterline. And there's so many phrases like that, like in rationalism, that evince that idea. And they consider protesting to be not that, and so it's very, very difficult for them to countenance. And I think it's just an aesthetic thing. And I really think, like, fine, like, I understand reacting that way initially. And then, of course, there are really times where your audience you're trying to reach is going to think the same. And so you shouldn't do that. I think Mary could have led protests. But like, if they don't want you, they want a different image, like, that's fine as an organization. Like, I don't think every organization needs to be out there protesting. And I don't think every person needs to be out there protesting if they really, truly have another thing that they're pursuing.
Right. So just to get my last MIRI criticisms out of the way here, because I think most of my criticisms are really for the community. And the big picture here is I don't think MIRI failed here, or like, I don't think that MIRI was inadequate here. I think MIRI was adequate. I think by creating this amazing book and seeding the community to begin with, and then kind of throwing the book over the fence and, agreeing to do interviews, like putting in, let's say, a good faith effort, right? They didn't like phone it in. I think they did enough, and they gave the community enough to run with, and the community dropped the ball more so than MIRI. That said, let me just get in my little MIRI nitpicks in here. I do think MIRI is also often hard to cooperate with themselves. Like you say, like, they're not really supporting the protest movement. They're not really supporting PauseAI in any way that I've seen. I don't think that they helped out that many people in the community with like interviews. I mean, I was fortunate enough to interview Eliezer. I know a number of other people who didn't get that opportunity. And in particular, like, the number one recommendation I gave them was like, rally the troops in the form of like a Discord before you launch the book, and just every week be like, okay, so these are our pre-orders. This is our best estimate of our pre-orders. We're hoping we can get more this week. Can anybody else like reach out to anybody? Do you need our help? What can we do to help? Like, have the Discord group, which is, as I understand it, this is a standard tactic that a lot of organizations use when they're trying to get numbers up. I don't think they did that. I personally actually told them to do it. The response I heard was like, that sounds like a pretty good idea. And then just like radio silence. So I do think
Well,
that's
they would need to get
representative of
4
how
other
MIRI
people to
functions.
approve it. So that's, they have, like,
Yeah.
organizational issues. Yeah, I've been pretty, I out PauseAI, and this was my idea. We've been putting a lot of work into promoting this book because, like, this is a great moment where we know there's going to be a conversation and like a news item about exactly this. And, we can also, it's an opportunity for fun stuff, instead of protests. That's hard. It is a big ask for everybody to do adversarial stuff. We're just having like a fun celebration where we're teaching people about what's in this book. That's coming up October 4th in San Francisco, by the way, at Manny's 5 to 8. So we've been putting a lot of work into this, and I was trying to get MIRI's help with this all up to the launch. And I would get like kind of supportive. Like, I guess I shouldn't like name names, but like one person very high up was like, yes, great idea. Let's do it. You should talk to these people. And then I would like talk to other people and they'd be like, well, we're not saying we're against PauseAI, but we just don't want to couple the fates of PauseAI and MIRI with, so we wouldn't want to like, and I was like, we're just offering to do a service for you. And like, I'm asking you, like, can you tell me some things about the book so we can promote it? And you're like, and like, that's just that's very typical of their culture. Like
Right,
their
similar. I mean, some of
culture.
the shows that didn't get interviews, I'm like, this show has a $500,000 a year budget promoting your message, and and not sponsored by you, and they're just asking for an interview. So I've heard, and they'll take Nate Soares too. It doesn't even have to be Eliezer Yudkowsky, and Nate was a great co-author and has a lot of great opinions himself. But no, they didn't get anybody from you, right? So
I
I know a
think
number of shows
they've
like
done
this.
a really good job with publicity considering how distrustful they are of journalists. Like this has been definitely an Eliezer position. He says this in his own voice online all the time. But also it's like a MIRI position that they just think like mainstream journalists like don't understand anything and they just don't understand what happened. Like they gave a very clear 5 paragraphs of information and the journalists like took it all out of context. Like, this is something that they've like described over and over. So I'm really happy with how far they did go with mainstream journalists and like they got a lot of great endorsements from big publications and things like that. And that was I know that was hard for them,
Uh-huh.
but like still, I've always found that like worthy of criticism. Like the way just the other day, Eliezer said something online about like he wasn't sure if he could believe this number in the New York Times because it was from a mainstream media source. And like, what are you trying to say? Like, you're not mainstream, like you don't trust, like why would you like my dad's a journalist. I've always been particularly sensitive to it because like rationalists in general tend to have these like, and they get their cues from Eliezer often, like they have these beliefs that like journalists just like don't understand anything and they're so manipulative because they don't do the speech act the way that they're supposed to. Like they don't
Yeah,
ask
I mean, I want
you
to
for
be
a bunch of
careful to, when
feedback,
you say this stuff, I mean, you got to also try to give Eliezer's side of the picture, right? I mean, he was right a few weeks ago on Twitter when some mainstream outlet tweeted, like some academic paper or something tweeted something, and Eliezer like rolled to disbelieve, and Eliezer was totally right, So let's try to be fair and balanced here.
It's more though, it's not just like they get stuff wrong or they don't have the highest standards of accuracy. Yes, of course, like it's different than like Eliezer always compares it to like nerds blogging. It's different than that and it's different than academic work. But it's just like a distrust that's very deep. And like up until now, Eliezer's like never been willing, never like deigned to try to talk in a way that it's more predictable what the journalist is going to understand and take from that. He is trying to do that now. Like they basically just read the
Yeah,
scripts, which is good. I'm glad that they're willing to do that.
yeah. All right, and yeah, so last thing in the MIRI criticisms from me section. They always feel like they're suffering from analysis paralysis. I think you mentioned something like that. And then whenever we interact with them, it's just like, it's kind of like pulling teeth, it feels like there's a long delay, like emails don't get responded to. And then we just get like a simple answer. It's like, okay. So I just get the sense they're kind of like energy vampires. And like, I know they're trying their best and they wish they could do better, but like, boy, it is just a little unpleasant dealing with them. Okay, so I keep it honest on this show. I mean, let's keep it in context. I'm the biggest MIRI fanboy that you're going to find. Okay, so these criticisms are just coming from a good place.
Yeah, it's not even just the delays. It's like, and then getting kind of a little slap in the face. Like in my case, a lot. Like every time I get an answer from MIRI, they're just sort of like, essentially like, well, we don't think you're that good.
Right? Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much. I hear you. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're not in the top of your field. Yeah. No, yeah, I can empathize with
They're
that impression.
arrogant.
Yeah.
They think they do things better, even though they like do things super slow and stuff. I feel like they make excuses for themselves. Like there's, um, I also think it's in other ways they're like deservedly arrogant. Yeah. So like overall,
Nice.
I
All
want
right.
to
All
say
right. All
like
right.
I'm super happy with what
Let's
they've
let
done, but they are like they're real people. Yeah.
let's move past this section because this episode is actually supposed to be an episode about not nitpicking things that are good overall. And like I said, I'm a big MIRI fanboy. My position on MIRI is that their work and their content is vastly underrated, and what they did in launching the book, despite all the nitpicks that we just went over, was more than adequate. So like they have done a great job overall, and
Yes.
that should be the bigger takeaway here.
No, and especially I think like I would give, extra like honor and dignity points to them for doing something that it did go against a lot of their hangups. Like I think it was quite difficult and it showed a lot of bravery and I really believe in them and Eliezer in a way that I don't in the rationalist community and that old part of the AI safety community anymore because of demonstrating that. Like I really believe they care and they have their heart in the right place.
Great. All right. So that said, let's go on to talk about other people's reactions to If Anyone Builds It, Everyone Dies. Maybe we can start with the most famous people reviewing the book. For example, there were the blurbs by like various national security people, right? People in government. Ben Bernanke was there, like R.P. Eddy. I mean, I could pull up the list myself. Yeah, okay. We got Fiona Hill, the former senior director of the White House National Security Council. Like, okay, I feel like I've heard that name before, right? I'm not intimately familiar, but that's great that these people are leaving positive reviews, right?
Lieutenant General Jack Shanahan, that was a big one. I remember they got that.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and the MIRI people told me, like, we mentioned these names to other people and they were shocked. They couldn't believe that we got these names. Like, I'll take their word for that, that they've done something really impressive in government. It's just, the problem is that, like, compared to a name like Sydney Sweeney, like in the general public, right? These people are like zeros, right? But I trust that they're like,
They got Mark Ruffalo.
yeah, okay, that's true. They got Mark Ruffalo. Yeah, no, I mean, look, their titles seem pretty legit, right? So, I mean, it's definitely something, and I think a representative kind of review is like the one from Ben Bernanke, Nobel laureate and former chairman of the Federal Reserve. It says a clearly written and compelling account of the existential risks that highly advanced AI could pose to humanity. Recommended, and that's to me, that's like it's just that's manna from heaven to be like, okay, here's a person who's respected in traditional institutions who's saying this is a recommended book and it's a compelling account. Because meanwhile, you've got like the mob on Twitter being like, still trying to gaslight us. Like, nobody believes this man. And then, of course, when I like point him to Ben Bernanke, like, Ben Bernanke, he's stupid, like he's nobody.
I don't respect Ben Bernanke. What's his Twitter at? Yeah, like,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's I think though this is actually part of what happened with the backlash and the nitpicking from the LessWrong community is LessWrong is LessWrong is an alternative community. Like, it's about not being part of mainstream institutions. It's about like have its own institution on its own, like, transparent but very difficult rules. And they don't like people being able to use like mainstream credibility and status like in their group. I mean, they feel like they're going to get mocked, which like they are, and I think this backlash is mainly about protecting like the exclusivity of AI safety, because it used to be, because it was just a niche topic, it would be a pretty good filter, and then it could be talked about in a very less wrong way. It took me a very long time to like peel off the less wrong talk from AI safety, like, because that was how I'd been introduced to it. But it's so unnecessarily complicated. And but like that was a filter for their community, and it gave them like a certain status to be able to play in that arena. And I did not know this at the time that I started trying to get people to do protests and stuff. And they started like attacking me. I mean, I feel a lot of empathy for Eliezer. It feels very similar. Like, suddenly there's something wrong with what you're saying, even though it's what everybody was saying, this is what it is. Like, they see this as like a thing that mainstream people can get, and that mainstream people, and they do not want normies invited into their space, and they feel like it's going to be taken away and they're going to like lose their special thing. And like, just the very topic of AI safety used to be enough of like a natural filter to have the kind of little community that they wanted. They don't want it to be mainstream. They don't want people to understand it. They don't want people to see that it's not that hard. They don't like Eliezer like giving away the secrets. Like,
I mean, the thing is, there's a lot of psychological theories we can have of why we think the community is the way it is. And I think that's an aspect of it. Sometimes there's the question of like, which of these theories is like more dominant in explaining the situation. And I'm not sure how dominant that is. Like, I think there's something to it, but it might be like the third place explanation of what's going on overall. So we'll have to look at the other explanations and try to sort them out.
I increasingly feel that this is like the main dynamic like going on with.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I think there's something to it. Maybe it's second place. I don't know if I'd put it first place, but we'll get back to it.
I want to know what you put first place, but I don't want to get ahead of you.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me tell you. I'll tell you soon.
Okay.
Fix the next topic. But let me go back to this book here. So I noticed this is kind of funny, but I agree with their choice here. So if you look at this book, If Anyone Builds It, Everyone Dies, only $14.99 on Amazon. If you look at the back, there's 11 different blurbs. So it's all about, credibility for the book. They don't even tell you what's the book's about. They just want to show you the praise. Okay, so then you open the book. And there is, to be fair, the jacket does kind of explain what the book is about. But then you go to the first page and all you see is praise for if anyone builds it, everyone dies. So it's a page of praise, another page of praise, another page of praise, um, 2 more pages of praise. So it's just, they really want to hit you with the praise to be like, listen, this is like a real thing, okay? What we're about to say, we're not cranks. Which, look, I think that's the right decision, you know?
I mean, they seem to think this would be their worry, and I'm glad that they dealt with that. It's more important to deal with what the public thinks than what, what was supposed to be the community of supporters thinks. But so I'm glad they prioritized that. I think that there's a trade-off with that stuff. That in LessWrong, if you show that you're like caring at all what the outside world thinks, or it's not just about the outside world doesn't include tech. But if you show at all that you care about what the outside world thinks and you're like trying to get their love, like they punish that.
Right. All right. Well, we talked about the respectable people who gave positive reviews to the book, like all these people in government. So let's start going down the scale of maybe people who weren't 100% positive. This is an interesting pivot point. Let's go to Emmett Shear because he's one of the prominent reviews here. Emmett Shear, former interim CEO of OpenAI, also the former founder and CEO of wildly successful startup Twitch, sold to Amazon. He also was at the party. So very interesting, intelligent guy. And he writes, Yudkowsky and Soros lay out in plain and easy to follow terms why our current path toward ever more powerful AIs is extremely dangerous. And that is consistent with what he told me at the party. He basically says that the book is very likely accurate in most or all of its claims. And he personally does disagree when you get to the question of like, okay, so how do we actually do alignment? What does alignment looks like? He starts to have his own disagreements. But the claim that we're on this default path that looks extremely scary and risky, he's on the same page. He rides the doom train past all of the early stops, which I think is awesome, right? I mean, do you have any thoughts on Emmett Shear?
I think it's very consistent with what he at least said before, which is not something I can say about a lot of other people reviewing the book. And I appreciate it. I think it's great. I don't know what to say about it.
Look, he wrote a great review, and that's really cool of him to like notice that the book is making important points and want other people to also
let
notice
me
them.
give my positive blurb on Emmett Shear. So I appreciate that Emmett Shear has both been quite like he's in his public persona, especially he's very pro alignment and safety, and he is very accessible as well, which is something I respect a lot.
Yeah, exactly. And he left this career of doing startups, successful startups, in order to pivot to doing an AI alignment research company. And again, you and I have all these bones to pick with him about how he's going about alignment, but just high level, the fact that he's saying, hey guys, AI alignment is this big problem and society isn't exactly on track to solve it. So we need a new company to research it. We're wildly in support of that part.
He does put his money where his mouth is. That's definitely, I have critiques, but it's not of that. I think he's willing to do what he thinks is right, which is kind of rare.
Exactly. All right. And continuing on this theme of people being super reasonable, even if they may have some beef, some nitpicks, but they're still being super reasonable about the review, let's go to Michael Nielsen. So he writes, this is a difficult book to review. There are significant holes at some points in the argument. These holes will be used by people who dislike the conclusion to justify ignoring or dismissing the book. However, the book also contains a large and important set of likely correct arguments. Yada, yada, yada. I recommend the book. So he's basically for the book. I mean, that's important to say. That's less ambivalent than a lot of other people have been, right?
Yeah, I really appreciated it. I from the beginning I thought like, oh God, am I gonna have to be annoyed at him too? But like, no, I appreciated it a lot.
Yeah, and he also says the quality of the arguments put forward by the people hypnotized by the seductive glitter of ASI are far weaker. Thank you. I mean, that's really the contrast to notice here, is that the other side's arguments are far weaker and also, contradictory with each other.
I mean, a big, probably like the biggest like meta goal that I have with PauseAI is to reframe like the burden of proof is like, you need to prove it's okay to do this, not like we need to show that definitely everyone would die, in order to stop you. Like, we don't know what can happen if you build this crazy, dangerous thing. Like, there are a million ways. We'll never anticipate all of the ways in which this could go wrong. Like, we need a lot more time to make sure this is safe. If we could ever decide to, it might not be possible to ever undertake this because of the amount of unknowns. And like, it's easy, I think, to make an accurate case especially if you're just talking about one scenario of what could go wrong. Like that's kind of the default. I expect it to go wrong in some way when you do something like this. But I don't want to wait for luck to protect us. I want our laws to enshrine an attitude toward creating dangerous technology that could coup everyone or kill everyone. Like I want our laws to be that you can't be trying to do that, except with a lot of democratic buy-in and a lot of safety, like, a CERN for AI type thing.
Mhm. Great. Okay. Yeah. And I'll just finish Michael Nielsen's thoughts. He thinks the harder alignment problem will be that when you have multiple super powerful agents, even if you got them all aligned with their creators, it's still super destabilizing. And maybe the first person who builds it will feel the need to defend their turf and go to war with anybody else before other people can slow them down. So he kind of sees a decentralized multi-agent world, whereas MIRI and Eliezer, and I guess me, we think the even bigger problem is like, you're not even going to control the first AI. So he's got a pretty significant disagreement on the details of why, if anyone builds it, everyone dies. But I'm just happy that his review has a good sense of perspective.
Agreed. Yeah, I really appreciated it, and I liked Michael, so I was like, it was like a nail biter, like whether I would have to be irritated at it.
Yeah, I like Michael too. All right, well done, Michael. All right, now let's go to a terrible one. I think we covered this on the launch party. Maybe it was me with another guest, but it's worth mentioning. It's the New York Times' Stephen March, who is clearly out of his element. I'm not familiar with Stephen March. I don't really read the New York Times book review section normally because I don't read mainstream media. Okay, So the whole article is titled "AI Bots Are Us: Who Will End Humanity First?" So they just dumped Eliezer Yudkowsky in together with like these other random books. He was like one of three. At least they put him at the top. Let me just skip to the part that I think is representative of the review as a whole. It says, Chapter 3, Learning to Want, is typical. It begins with a conversation between a professor and a student about whether a chess computer wants to win at chess. The authors then continue with an inexcusably lazy explanation of why the computer chess program does what it does. Quote, we'll describe it as wanting to win. In saying this, we're not commenting one way or the other on whether a machine has feelings. Rather, we need some word to describe the outward winning behavior, and want seems close. And then Stephen March continues, from that vague foundation, they proceed to extrapolate not only fantasies of the end of the world, but frantic, pointless questions like, but wouldn't the AI keep us around as pets? Okay, so Stephen March is basically saying, they gave a vague foundation by defining wanting vaguely. Whereas from my perspective, it's like, no, I mean, the dangerous thing that we normally think of as wanting really is the ability to drive a system toward a goal. And then like you perturb the system, you try to like, get it off course, and it still gets back on course and drives toward the goal. Like I think they've correctly defined to a very high, useful degree what the dangerous part of wanting is.
Agree. This is it's like philosophy 101 kind of like errors or like to not. Yeah, but I hadn't read that one yet, but it does feel like utterly typical. But it is just sad to see people like founder at the earliest, like, the earliest opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's infuriating the disconnect between like, so this person, he's like, okay, the whole Doom train, how there's like 83 stops on the Doom train, like this Stephen March version, that's what I think. There's so many places to get off. Well, I know the one true place to get off. It's their definition of wanting, okay? That's where they screwed up. They gave a vague definition of wanting. It's like, what are you talking about, man? That is not the place to get off the Doom train. If you're going to get off, there's so many stops where you can reasonably get off, but this one
That was
isn't
their
it.
whole case. Yeah.
It's just like we're so screwed. Like the amount of stops on the Doom train. It's just they'll never. And of course, if you're somebody like Richard Hanania, some people think the Doom train is like a conjunction fallacy, and they're like, listen, it's enough for me that there's a lot of stops. Okay, one of them is bound to be the right stop.
Yeah, I don't think about this as much as I did like in 2023. Like after like ChatGPT and like, oh my gosh, like this is going to happen now, like in my lifetime instead of in the future. Like the amount of stuff that seemed like makes no difference, like philosophical issues that have really surfaced as extremely important to understanding AI safety. Huge. I mean, like consciousness, the hard problem. There's a real world thing. I'm talking about that every day now. Like there's like ideas about teleology that like I was like accustomed to talking about a lot in like the context of evolutionary biology, like that suddenly, people will argue like that means that like AI can't be dangerous. It can't be smart enough. It can't be real. And if it can't be real, then it can't like do any harm.
So yeah, while we're dissing the NY Times, I think it's important for me to bring out my tier list of NY Times AI journalists. So at the bottom, we have Stephen March and Cade Metz. Those people are just consistently terrible at covering the AI space. And then on the top, we have Kevin Roos. I personally think Kevin Roos is decently good at covering the AI space. I just think the rest of the New York Times team is just like insane. And there were some good reviews of the review on Twitter where somebody had a nice sharp criticism where he's like, man, it must be great to be like a New York Times book reviewer. Like you just don't have to read the book at all because there was like some claim in the review that like was just factually false about the book. It's not worth getting into more detail about it, but like, yeah, we said enough there. Let's go to one that we're more disappointed and surprised by. Let's go to Will MacAskill, right? I think you had a sharp reply to him. So
Thought about this
that
a
up.
lot. I was very upset.
Yeah.
Because even so, Will, just put a little context on Will. Will is like a very big figure in effective altruism. He's a professor at Oxford. I think he's the youngest philosophy professor at Oxford ever. And he wrote like the trade book for EA, Doing Good Better. And then he wrote this big book about long-termism.
Yeah, by the way, Doing Good Better, highly recommended book. One of the best
Yeah.
books I've read in my life, quite frankly. I recommend it to everybody.
Yeah, so he's a big EA guy, and he really like moved hard into AI safety, or like thinking about the future, like defined by existential risks. Not defined, like protecting the future from existential risk was his real focus in the last like 5 years, more than that, 8 years. So he knows a lot about this. So let's just read the review.
Okay. So he says, here's a mini review of If Anyone Builds It, Everyone Dies. I'll at least read his TLDR. He says, I found the book disappointing. I thought it relied on weak arguments around the evolution analogy, an implicit assumption of a future discontinuity in AI progress. I think he means like discontinuity upward, right?
Mm-hmm.
Conflation of quote unquote misalignment with catastrophic misalignment, and that their positive proposal was not good. I had hoped to read a Yudkowsky-Soros worldview that has had meaningful updates in light of the latest developments in ML and AI safety, and that has meaningfully engaged with the scrutiny their older arguments received. I did not get that. I think if a younger version of me had read this as my first exposure to the field, I'd have either bounced off altogether if I'd correctly assessed that the arguments are not good, or come away with substantively the wrong strategic picture. This is a shame, because I think the risk of misaligned AI takeover is enormously important. And then he does go on to elaborate on why he disagrees with the evolution analogy and why he disagrees with discontinuities in AI progress. So I just read you the TLDR of his review. What are your thoughts?
I didn't even I mean, you can look at my Twitter for if you want to see like more in depth, but I didn't even engage with the evolution part, even though I have a PhD in evolutionary biology. And it was this kind of, to be frank, I have never really understood what people in AI safety think that argument is or means. But he's wrong here. Like, I'll just briefly say why. He's wrong because he's like giving a bunch of differences in like, natural selection of humans, like versus ML, but like none of them are like the crux. Like what he's really claiming to disagree with is like the principle of good hearting. And I know he wouldn't disagree with that. So it just, that felt very, I don't know, like, that felt, I don't know if maybe like because I understand that topic better, that like it feels bad faith to me, but that one felt kind of bad faith to me. I felt like that was just waffling, like, oh, there's a reason you could poke holes in this, so we don't have to agree with it. But the thing that really bothered me was further down, he talks about like what he thinks is most likely to happen. And there's this part where he talks about making deals with AIs and how like we can know, we don't have to know exactly what's going on, and exactly what they value and all that, like in order to.
Yeah, let's read that part because
Yeah.
I agree. That's probably the single weakest thing out of all the different things he wrote. This seems like the clearly the weakest. Okay, so Will MacAskill is saying that AI is likely to be risk averse because that way it can increase its odds of success by not coming out with a big risk that might fail, like making a bid to take over the world when it doesn't have a 100% chance of succeeding. So to quote part of his language, he says, the risk-averse AI still wants power and self-preservation, but that needn't result in human extinction because it prefers deals that give it a high chance of some amount of power to attempts at takeover that give it some lower chance of lots of power. We can have misalignment without catastrophic misalignment. Maybe we won't be able to make deals with AIs. I agree that's a worry, but then the right response is to make sure that we can. won't the superintelligence have essentially 100% chance of taking over if it wanted to? But that's again invoking the discontinuous jump. So Will MacAskill, he has this mainline scenario where the jump is going to be slow enough and the AI is going to be risk averse and we're going to be making deals. And you disagree.
So the main like thread that I think the real crux of where we disagree is like Will is representing this like cluster of people who think this way. They're like taking very seriously, like you give them a bunch of parameters for the scenario, and then they're like, how do you actually maximize the area under the curve? Well, like given that this function behaves like this, and like, oh, if we could tweak it, then like, these parameters are acceptable. And they're really trying to like maximize the area under that curve. And like, I'm trying to think about what's going to happen. Like, and to them, like, if they can make an argument that, like, no, but I have a scenario where in this scenario, if you take these starting conditions, these things happen. You could imagine a world where because, scaling progress is smooth and we can always like check in on what's happening, it would be possible for us to gauge appropriately what the power level of AIs are and like make it so that the incentives are such for them to make deals with us, even if we're not, aligned. And like, this story is they're getting like no ding for like how many ifs there are in the story and like how particular it is. But because they can kind of tell the story end to end, it's fine. And they think like, well, you just have to deal with that. Whereas like if you kind of reply with like, I'm worried that that's not robust at all, like there's a lot of assumptions, but even if they were all true, like you could just fail to pull this off. Like it's just not robust. It's not giving any time for this whole thing to play out. Like there's a million ways.
Exactly. Like everything Will is saying, right? It's like let's even grant, okay, Will, that's a great mainline scenario. I personally don't think that's a mainline scenario, but let's say even if it is, it's like, aren't you reserving 20% chance that that's just not the scenario and the scenario is very different because your key assumptions don't hold because you shouldn't be that confident in them?
It annoys me how at times it feels like in this review he's only addressing like, will everyone die? But then like it comes across as saying like, well, this book is wrong. Like this shit's not going to happen. Like when like if you look closely, it's like, will everyone die? Like, or will everyone die immediately? Like, I don't know. Like, as if this is this important. We need to know which scenarios will, have everyone immediately obliterated versus like dying slowly over 50 years. Like it's so like not the point. Like it's just so not caring about like what happens. Like I don't want to be like upset at him for making an academic review because like, that's what it is. But the proportions are just so off. And like, but the thing that annoyed me more than anything else is this line of, well, what if the AIs don't want to make deals? That could happen. We just have to make sure they can. Like,
Yeah.
how? Isn't that the alignment problem? Like,
It's like you're dealing with something that's a problem you don't understand, right? It's like rocket engineers being like, oh yeah, okay, so we're just gonna have to make sure that the rocket just always has enough weight that it can get it to orbit, just always has enough margin of error that it can get the weight to orbit. It's like, okay, that's always going to be a very hard constraint satisfaction problem.
it's like always. What else do you think rocket science is? Like, I don't like, like this is, it's not, but like here, so you can't, like he knows you can't just say we have to make sure AI is aligned, but this is basically that. Like we just have to make sure the AIs, we can make deals with the AIs. Like, doesn't that require like significantly constraining them? Like to be sure that it's going to be in their interest to make deals, or like that they're going to be competent to make deals according to what we think is the right calculus, or like this just is the alignment problem.
No,
Like,
I agree. Look, I mean, I agree. I find this level of discourse evidence in this tweet alarming for the same reason as you. Okay, let's go to some of the comments here because this is a whole discourse. This tweet got 104,000 views on Twitter, which is a pretty high amount. It got 559 likes. All right, so the first comment in my sorting is actually for me. It's saying, hey, Will, you make some sharp points here. I'm planning a Doom Debates episode on the reception of If Anyone Builds It, Everyone Dies. So he was invited to come be part of this episode or do another episode and just talk about his review, basically debate it out. So I haven't heard from him on that front, but let's go to your reply. You said, these criticisms read to me as development could go in a less catastrophic direction, but pausing could conceivably have a bad outcome rather than engaging with the overwhelming thrust of what society should do when toying with making catastrophically dangerous tech. And then you escalated it to a quote. You quoted the part where he said, maybe we won't be able to make deals with AIs. I agree that's a worry, but then the right response is to make sure we can. And you're like, triple question mark. This sentence alone should be disqualifying from serious discussion. Fair enough. And then you also had a quote to me where you say, really disappointed that this is what Will MacAskill is doing now. But I guess when you want to work on, quote, post-singularity governance, you don't want to switch to trying to stop the singularity. This whole description of superalignment reads like a parable on greed and hubris. Okay, I mean, I agree with the part that his focus on post-singularity governance is pretty optimistic, right? It's definitely like assuming that there will be such a thing.
No, but it really disappointed me, and I just felt like, the lashing out is kinda just I just, like, the frustration of realizing, like, "Oh, like, we're just not in good faith anymore, and, like, this group is going to reinforce each other on that." And, like, it used to be a place where I really felt like we were all trying to figure things out, and we were all really trying to, like, do what's good for the world, and I really did consider Will, like, a huge ally on that, leader in that, and to see this turn on AI safety where, like, I mean, I'm just gonna say my supposition on it. I mean, I feel like that group kinda, like, went in on a strategy of working with the labs, or in the case of Anthropic, kinda like being a lab, and they just don't wanna give that up, like, and even though there is a better solution now, which would have been a better solution from the beginning if we could have rallied public opinion, or if we could have had, like, really engaged lawmakers on it, like, to care about the substance, of the issue and to, like, care about our safety, and I just think a lot of people aren't ready to give up on working hands-on with the machine. They love, like, working with the models. They have these dreams of what's gonna happen post-singularity. That's, like, what Will does now is, like, work on, like, post-singularity futures. Um, and they're
Yeah.
just so invested in that I think it's just, like, to say, like, "Oh, hey, let's do pause." I think pause is compatible with thinking about these things and also working on technical solutions. I think pause is helpful in 2 ways. One, if it was achieved, it would give more time for that to be done safely and well and under democratic control. 2, advocating for a pause makes it easier for their solutions to be, like, stomached in society. It's more of like a compromise it becomes to just work on, technical safety. And, like, I'm happy if, like, in trying to get to a pause, we just make things a little safer, that way. That's, like, still better than nothing. Um, so I think these things can work together, but, like, in practice, like, they, for some reason, don't wanna support pause-related stuff. I don't really know why. I can speculate that it, like, makes them feel bad, or, like, they don't feel that they can do that without undercutting their case, or I don't know. Um, but it's extremely disappointing to me because I think it's just, like, textbook motivated reasoning.
Yeah. Now, personally, there's like, I mean, I can't follow you all the way down from, okay, Will wrote this and then, his motive is this. I mean, you got to be careful to really only give an ounce of psychoanalyzing for a pound of
I mean,
more
it's not all
directly
based
responding
on
to the
this
arguments.
review, like, I have other
Yeah.
reasons for thinking this. No, and especially
Yeah.
in this discourse, it's very outlawed to think about motives, Like, that's not
Yeah,
good
I noticed
debate,
that was a tweet
right?
you had, so we can zoom out into that, right? So that, I mean, that is, to be honest, becoming kind of your specialty, right? That's one of your special points that you think is underrated, right? And so you have to signal boost this point of like, look at these people motives.
Yeah, well, I think it wouldn't fly in another community. Like, I think that just mostly people call bullshit more than this, and they're not as sensitive to accusations of, you're not being charitable to me, like, but that's, like, deadly in rationalist discourse. Like, you can't be doing that. Even though people do, of course, like, they do this kind of thinking all the time, but on certain topics, you'll be called out and it's not allowed. And, like, whether someone is really doing their best, like, to do the things they say about, like, keeping people safe, like, one of these topics, like, you're not really allowed to question that, or, like, oh, if that person can string together, like, something that, could happen or could be real, like this story, this, like, crazy, like, Rube Goldberg machine of the, like, scaling story, and how, but with deals and AI control and, like, all of this, like, it'll turn out, like, so it's actually silly to try to stop it because, so, like, in that review, there's good evidence for one comparison. There's a lot of space given to this, like, Rube Goldberg machine, like, how, because things are smooth and scaling and because the AIs will be risk averse and all that, like, we can know we kinda got it. We should keep going. pause is dismissed with like, couldn't that disrupt the race dynamics? Can't do it.
Yeah.
Like that's not, and this is very hard to prosecute. Like you have to be willing, I have to be willing to take a hit to like my like debate score in order to say that. But it's just to the point where that's my true belief of what's going on. Like it doesn't, I've done, and I believe in myself and I trust myself because I tried in sincere good faith and like innocence for a very long time to make sense of these positions. And they don't make sense because it's just people are not being honest. Maybe they're not even aware of their own motivations. There's not a lot that's going to encourage them to be honest. Like nobody can ever call them out. Nobody can ever access they've got this great position where it's protected. Like they're allowed to just have whatever dissonance or like pursue whatever ulterior motive.
I agree. It's a very socially comfortable niche right now to be like, I'm taking all the perspectives into account. I don't think any one of the perspectives is that clear. I think it's fine to just work on the good scenario. I think it's fine to work on post-singularity governance because nobody knows that it's not going to go well. That's like, there should be some people working on post-singularity governance. And also, if I do work at an AI company like Anthropic, look, there's enough uncertainty. Like maybe Anthropic will have a good role to play. Also, I make a ton of money and I'm like the hottest part in the tech industry. I mean, it's just there's a lot of social positive reinforcement and just comfort. It doesn't feel like you're taking that big of a risk. I mean, there's some people like me and you who are out there like yelling at him and protesting it, but so far the overall magnitude of the social bubble is just balanced at plenty of positive reinforcement.
Yeah, and they're free to be as tough as they want on like arbitrarily unfairly tough on pause type positions, and you can't be first. They'll like like shout you down if you don't have like qualifications in ML in the first place, and try to say that like because of that you can't say what's going to happen. You also can't even have like moral and ethical opinions on AI because of that. Now that's like not so bad, but like they continue to find ways that nobody can confront them. Nobody can take away. They have policing mechanisms within their own world, like, but nobody can take away the cachet of this thing and nobody can talk about how precious it obviously is. Like, you can't say, like, isn't it great to make all that money? Like, no, they're just doing it because it's the right thing. Like, they deserve a little something, like, it just, what about all the status of like having this job? Like, just no, that doesn't have anything to do with it. Like,
well, I'll give you my take on your take and also tell the viewers where I stand. So I mentioned in the party, I think you're a thought leader because you often come out with these statements that like I hadn't considered or maybe even I hadn't allowed myself to think, right? That's kind of your specialty is like thinking outside the box, moving the Overton window. You were the one who a couple of years ago was saying, hey, we should go out there with a megaphone and protest. And now I'm on that page too. But if you hadn't said it, I wouldn't have said it, right? And I pride myself on sometimes noticing things like that, right? I should have been the guy who said, let's go out on a megaphone and protest. But no, but it definitely wasn't me. It was you. And you're the ones who actually planned the protest. I would have been like, yeah, that's a good idea, but I wouldn't have planned it. But you planned it. So I thought you were a thought leader then. You're still doing the protest. And I think you're a thought leader. A lot of the stuff you're saying on Twitter of like, hey, these people are like pretty messed up. And like a lot of their social dynamics and motivations are pretty messed up. I think you're directionally correct. I just don't think that I follow you all the way. I think you may be racing ahead with some of these particular points. And I know you're saying that you tried not to and you've been down like a long slope where you just got more and more convinced. So maybe you're right, but I just want the viewers to know I'm just not following you all the way.
You don't have to. I mean, yeah, like, this is a thing that I do now is Overton window pushing, like, and I go a little. I'm hoping to give like a shadow, for other people, and like other people don't have to go as far as I do. I don't say stuff I don't think is true, even though that could be effective, for the Overton window pushing strategy. I don't. I just really to be who I am, to say the things the way that I say them, like they need to be what I really think. But yeah, and I have also probably where you can't follow me is more like the like fiery passion of it. Like, and that does have to do with like specifically me being wronged. And like, I don't expect people who are just trying to figure out what's true to feel that way, like about the issue. Like, I felt gaslit for a very long time, and gaslit in a very painful way. I mean, so like not only were people saying like, They didn't want to say, I just don't want to do protests. They were telling me that it was bad, and actually I was bad, and they were like going for the very thing that compelled me to do it, was like doing the right thing. And they were going for that motivation. Like they were nasty about it. And there was no repercussion for them using those arguments.
That's so fair. And if you look at it today in 2025, because there's been this little trickle of protests, right? I mean, let's be honest, it's only a trickle, but it's something. Because that's been happening now for 2 years and it's gotten a disproportionate amount of media coverage and everybody knows it's a thing. I feel like you don't hear that many people being like, no, don't protest, because everybody's like, yeah, some people protest, right? That's called moving the Overton window.
Oh, yeah. No, totally. And it happened after the first protest. Like, people were really trying to get me not to do the first one. And then as soon as it happened, they were kind of like, I guess this happens now,
Yeah, whatever. Some people protest. Yeah, exactly.
And then they
It's
kind of
not a
moved
big
to
deal at
like
all.
why it was cringe, but they weren't like, you can't, it's going to like reflect on us somehow, and like you can't, and like, but this
Right.
is gonna be
And
so
I would
bad.
also call it status quo bias, right? Because if we had gone back in time and said, okay, imagine a future where the protests are already happening, would you really be like, stop the protests?
No, and some of my anger, that like pushes me to be willing to just like be out there with a lot of these ideas is it's because like I was very trusting, and I really believed in the ideals of effective altruism and rationality. And I really thought the people around me were upholding that standard. And like they weren't ready for protests. I thought they would be. I thought we were all just waiting to have the opportunity to talk to the public, because that's what people would say. I asked that question like 10 years ago, like, what about public stuff? And the answer I got was like, oh, you'll look crazy, and it's not time yet, but like one day, for sure. I thought that day had come when, after we get these polls after the pause letter from FLI, like showing such high agreement with the ideas in the letter, I thought like, okay, yes, like time to do it. Just suddenly nobody wants to do it, but they don't want to say, I don't want to do it. And I don't even know if they're lying. I think like they might just be not very like honest with themselves on this, but they don't want to say, I don't want to do it. But they have to have some reason that, like actually it's bad to do it. And like they need to keep doing what they're doing.
So yeah, so massive respect, because you've demonstrated this ability. Like when you move the Overton window, it means you have to like use your brain to logically come up with something that should be done, even though there's like no social proof, right? There's no social feedback that that's the thing to do, but you just identify it as a thing to do and then you do it. That is like super rare. So yeah, so props for doing that. I think there's a natural segue here to the review that I personally think is the most similar, which is Clara Collier from Asterisk Magazine. Asterisk Magazine, normally we like Asterisk Magazine, right? There's a
I
lot of
really
respect
like
for
it.
Asterisk.
Yeah. I would.
Yeah, in the rationality community. I think even Clara Collier, I don't know her well, but I think that she's considered, a thoughtful writer in general, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know Clara that well, but I did like, hang out with her a few times at Constellation back when they would let me in there, which is like a workspace for sort of the kind of research that like Will was describing, like that, happens there.
Exactly. So here's the review title is called More Was Possible, a review of If Anyone Builds It, Everyone Dies. And the reason it's a segue is because if you look back at Will MacAskill's review, Will writes, I had hoped to read a Yudkowsky source worldview that has had meaningful updates. So he's using that same terminology of like updating your belief. I'd hoped to have meaningful updates in light of the latest developments in ML and AI safety, and that has meaningfully engaged with the scrutiny. So Will's pulling the same position of like, Eliezer Yudkowsky never updated. He's just been stuck. All this evidence is coming at him that he's been ignoring. And that's right in the first couple sentences here of Clara Collier's review. Clara Collier's
Yeah.
language is, the book is full of examples that don't quite make sense and premises that aren't fully explained, but its biggest weakness was described many years ago by a young blogger named Eliezer Yudkowsky. Oh, snap, you got him, : both authors are persistently unable to update their priors. So everybody is suddenly a Bayesian reasoning expert in their reviews, thinking that Eliezer has failed to notice that there's more evidence of the hypothesis that we're not doomed compared to evidence of the hypothesis that we are. And so he should like multiply an odds ratio and come out with a higher belief that we're not doomed. Okay, there is actually, as an intermediate Bayesian myself, somebody who's looked a little bit into the math of Bayesian updates, guess what? You can still encounter different kinds of evidence and come away with the same probability that you had before you saw the evidence and still have updated. Okay, so that's a technical correction right off the bat.
Yeah, Clara saying that like, sassy, like you should have listened to Eliezer Yudkowsky. Like, I thought, like, are you really gonna call him a hypocrite? Like, because, like, I felt like it was like it felt cruel to me to like kind of imply like how far you've fallen and you're not living up to. It's worse than just like not updating. Like you're not living up to like what you said, and like it just felt like it was not necessary to like get in that little flourish. Like so like that I just felt was mean, and then like
No, totally. Yeah,
I
it was a low blow. I mean, I guess if you're if you're writing on like a snark forum, then sure, it is good snark. I mean, look, so the problem for me really is that technical Bayesian math. I mean, let me unpack that a little bit. So, when you have a Bayesian prior, it's not just a number that you then go higher when you encounter certain evidence. A Bayesian prior is actually a larger mathematical object that encodes what different pieces of evidence will then mean to you. So Eliezer could have told you a priori that if he sees a piece of evidence of an AI that hasn't crossed the superintelligent threshold yet, and that AI is nice and safe, that doesn't necessarily constitute evidence to update on. He could have told you that beforehand. His conditions for changing his probability weren't met. That was actually encoded into the structure of his Bayesian prior. So this is getting a little bit pedantic, but Clara Collier writing this review, really should have had that level of rigor when she says he didn't update. No, sorry, that is not correct. I would argue that Eliezer has in fact updated his priors, despite the fact that his probability of doom hasn't gone down.
I'm gonna go even further and not implicate Liron when I do, but that I sometimes wonder if like when you hear lines like this that are like repeated among this whole group, like if like overtly or covertly they are coming from Anthropic and they're like that's the party line like on or because they're trying to keep going, and they want that this population of like EA rationalists, like they want them for talent and like they want their existing employees to like believe in the mission and everything. I don't know how much enforcement it even takes, or if it's just like sort of Dario kind of puts out or somebody at the top like puts out like apologetics like this and then they all just kind of pick them up and they sort of know that this is like the right thing we're supposed to think. But like it feels propagandistic, I guess, like to be like saying like, like, oh, Eliezer can't update. Eliezer's not engaging with like the new information. Eliezer's not really that. He doesn't know about ML. Like he's not really that smart anymore. Like he's kind of a has-been. Like all of this for people who are there because of Eliezer and like and liking Eliezer's like style of thinking and who can judge for themselves like based on Eliezer's like more in-depth writing that's more in the style they liked, about like how well he's keeping up with these developments. And like he's given answers to why he doesn't think that current, ML is like meaningfully updates him. He has given those answers before. Like I don't even know what answers like conceivably he hasn't given that they might not have seen. But like to kind of like push like the line that like he doesn't get it about if you're a real expert, which now means essentially working at an AI lab, like that is what's required to be an expert, then you'll see that actually this is how it works. So I'm just going to throw that out there as like part of the whole like motivational ecosystem.
Yeah. This idea that the community has left Eliezer Yudkowsky behind. We all updated, I guess Liron didn't update, right? But all these other smart people, they updated. And Eliezer's just stuck here, not updating. He's just going to be like shaking his fist forever. And we're all so smart and we're setting up post-singularity governance. Sorry, but from my own capabilities of just like looking at how much sense people are making and looking at the various communities of people and seeing, what do you think about AI? I mean, I listen to a ton of podcasts for one thing, right? So I absorb information that way. And my own judgment, it's not like I see all these other non-Eliezer people and I'm like, wow, that person has so much insight from absorbing new evidence that Eliezer hasn't absorbed. No, sorry, from my perspective, and of course Eliezer's own perspective, from my perspective, to the extent that I can be objective as somebody who's agreed with Eliezer in the past, I think Eliezer is keeping pace with the important developments. I think the people around him are incredibly intelligent. You're like, as an example, I had Stephen Burns on the show. Stephen Burns is not like me, where I'm like so much an Eliezer fanboy, and I just think Eliezer is like more right than I can ever be. Like, I'm just never going to have as much knowledge and insight about the subject as Eliezer already does. That's my perspective about myself. Stephen Burns is coming at it from a very different angle. He's a math contest winner, Harvard genius, like, postdoc, won a bunch of awards, like, top caliber brain, came at it from his own direction, does his own cognitive science research, has his own alignment program, but he still thinks that Eliezer's conclusions are timely and accurate, right? I mean, there's social proof of that. So I don't understand how you can be so smug and call Eliezer does, or somebody who hasn't updated?
I mean, my impression from being in that world is that there's kind of a conspiracy. I don't know how accurate that is as far as like somebody's directing this. There are people who are benefiting from it and like at some level, like directing kind of what everybody's supposed to think about what's going on in, a machine learning alignment. But like there's just a consensus, and a more neutral explanation of it is like they just are attracted to stuff that feels kind of more complex. Like they're attracted to stuff that feels like it's more hands-on. And it ends up becoming like, okay, so whatever you're already doing, whatever your research is, the cool, shiny things are working with the models and working with big data sets and getting time from Anthropic to run experiments. That's what's really cool. And it pretty much adding like other beliefs or like theories of change or about the research doesn't add much like predictive power to like like if you're to knowing that like one path leads to getting to do that kind of work. Richard
Right.
No once he wrote a note on either EA Forum or LessWrong, where I couldn't believe he like just said the quiet part out loud, but I think about this a lot because I think it's going on a lot. But he basically said, it was right when like around the time of the first PauseAI protest, he said there's like two pathways we can go down. One is like cool, like empirical, like we're building things, we're working on things, like everybody's excited, everybody's having fun, we're working with the models. Two is it's like environmentalism and it sucks. Everybody's depressed because they have to do activism. And he just said it, but like, I think like a lot of people have this view that like, it's almost like a form of evidence, like how much more fun of an environment it is to be working on. And how could it not be the right thing to do? They're techno-optimists, like they're finding solutions. Like,
Yeah.
how could it not be right to be like in this environment that's invigorating and you've got a lot of support? The whole like beautiful, like what was the EA community, like basically got co-opted into doing this stuff to support Anthropic. Like it was a beautiful community and I mourned it a lot and I couldn't understand what was happening like as it like switched over until like eventually I was out, because I'd like made the wrong moral call according to them.
What was the incident where you were out because you made the wrong moral call?
I felt like what they wanted was for me to like make my wording so like tortured and like rat style that basically like no, it wouldn't appeal to any member of the public. But like they said that I could do, of course we can do public, of course we can do that, that's good, but they would always have a problem with the execution. People would say like the signs gave them so many problems because they didn't want to write a sentence that short. Like people would put footnotes on the signs, like they put an asterisk and a footnote.
All right. So finishing up with this review, I do think Clara Collier's review has a lot of consensus that it was like an especially weak review, and I think that the not updating is just a taste of it being weak. But let's move on. Let's go to Vox. I'll just read the title. Quote, "AI will kill everyone," unquote, is not an argument. It's a worldview. Mic drop. That's the title of this Vox article. It's by Sigal Samuel, who I think normally, I really am not familiar with her work, but I think normally she's considered like a respectable Vox writer who normally can analyze things decently. And then her subtitle is "How Rational is Eliezer Yudkowsky's Prophecy?" You know anything about Sigal Samuel?
No, she did write something that was not liked about the EA community, but which at that point I felt was fair. That was the
Okay.
only time I've like paid attention that I was reading her.
Yeah. All right. Well, I mean, look, I think the title speaks for itself. AI will kill everyone is not an argument. Yeah, it's not an argument because arguments
It's the conclusion.
connect claims to evidence. And that's just a claim.
It's
AI
the
will kill everyone
conclusion
is
of the
right. It's a
book,
claim. It's a conclusion. Right. So, I
which
mean,
is
if
often
you're
the title.
trying, yeah. So if your title is coming from the domain of epistemology, right? Epistemology is the study where we take those kinds of phrases and classify whether their epistemological status is that of an argument or a claim or a worldview. And then you just bungle it right in the title. It's like, how good is the post going to be? Like, turns out it's not good. We obviously don't have time to go through the whole post, and it's also paywalled. But I do have one clip from Paul Crowley, who goes by CypherGoth on Twitter. Paul Crowley says, "I'm right to stop reading the Vox review at the point where she wildly misrepresents Eliezer's article in Time, yes?" And then he quotes Segal Samuel saying that Eliezer says the only reasonable thing to do is stop all efforts to build it, including by bombing data centers that power the AIs if necessary. So Paul Crowley is just pointing out that Segal Samuel is misquoting Eliezer as wanting to escalate all the way toward bombing, when really what Eliezer said is we should escalate to an international treaty. There's no way to solve this short of an international treaty. And I don't mean the kind of international treaty where you can violate it and nothing happens for 50 years. I mean the kind of international treaty where violating is severely punished. Like, we will take out your data centers if you violate the treaty. That's what Eliezer said, not I'll get angry and angrier until I bomb you. It's like very big difference.
I mean, to be fair, I really wish he hadn't said it that way. I knew how to interpret the Time article because he has this long history of like, he admires Orwell, and Orwell is always like, if you're talking about, you can never euphemize like political violence. You have to be like honest about what it is, and like state violence, and you have to like call it what it is. And like, if he had just said, if we would have a treaty where like kinetic action would be, part of enforcement, nobody would have batted an eye because that's the way you normally say it. But like, but to him, it was important to say that because I think he was like wrestling with turning to the state to try to solve something. But it confused people.
Well, there's also like a difference. I mean, sometimes you get an international treaty that's kind of toothless and it's more of like just for show. And then you also have other international treaties like nuclear proliferation where somebody violates it and you're like, okay, we really need to consider attacking immediately, right? So there's different grades of international treaty. And I think Eliezer wanted to be very clear. No. This is the serious kind where our lives are at risk.
He wanted to he was addressing like when state violence is justified, because that's a big issue to him as like a strong libertarian, and like most people just don't need that at all. So I do understand why they would be like, why would you even say you bomb data centers? Like, if you mean like that would be the enforcement of a treaty, like I understand why some people became confused. I do feel that the Vox journalist had a higher responsibility, but
Yeah. So I think that's a low blow. And yeah, just to go back to the title of, it's not an argument, it's a worldview. It's like, what the hell? It's like, oh, I'm just going to dismiss anybody who would dare to say AI will kill everyone. You can't say AI will kill everyone, okay? And this is, smarter, more technical people have made a similar claim. Like, I have a whole episode from last year. Sayesh Kapoor, one of the AI snake oil guys, right? He was very big on how we can't make policy based on probability estimates, man. We have to make policy based on something else.
what
Right?
do you
That's the
ever
same
make
epistemic
policy
flavor.
on? Like, what?
Right, exactly. The same epistemic flavor as AI will kill everyone is not an argument, it's a worldview.
Yeah.
It's just like, listen, the epistemics are fine. We're just debating what the probability is.
I do think there's a lot of cultiness in the AI safety world, and people are not wrong to pick up on that. But we need to distinguish the argument from that feeling. I think like a great thing we can do is just have lots of people, be aware of this so that it isn't something that can be associated with like one weird community but like, I don't understand how you could get it from this book. Like, I do not think this book sounds culty at all, but like the sequences, HPOR, Harry Potter and the Methods of Rationality, which Eliezer wrote to recruit people to work on AI or AI safety, they are all an invitation to be in a cult. Like, I think like, like there's sort of like, you're in the Bayesian conspiracy, now you're special. And I do understand people are right, I think, to have an immune reaction to that if they get that whiff. And a lot of people have that whiff like pretty strongly from knowing the rationality community or knowing EA. And yeah, they're not crazy. They're not like, I think like the arguments need to stand on their own. But like, if you kind of only get 10% of it, but like you're getting this huge like wave of like, there's something else. They want me to like do something because of this, and I don't want to, like then I do understand that.
Now, the last and maybe most important topic of the show that we're going to get to is the circular firing squad. The idea that we have this community and we really are aligned to this mission, AI risk reduction, saving the world. To be a little hyperbolic, not even that hyperbolic, right? We're really just trying to survive the next decade or two. And yet, we spend most of our time nitpicking each other and sending ambiguous signals about what we believe. Do you agree with that general thesis?
Yes.
So you could call it the circular firing squad. I remember Barack Obama called his party a bit of a circular firing squad sometimes. Like Democrats don't get on the same page the way Republicans do. I would maybe use a different metaphor for Less Wrong, because I don't think that you get like a food fight dynamic on Less Wrong. It is quite polite and civil. Less Wrong has a lot of stuff to its credit. It is quite open-minded. There's actually always somebody who will stand up for like the good side, to steel man any position. So I don't intuitively feel like it's a circular firing squad, but I feel like it's on the spectrum toward circular firing squad, meaning it's not all the way toward like aligning on important things. It's on the spectrum toward circular firing squad. And it lands on a place that I call the crab bucket. It's like everybody can stay in the bucket and have a polite discourse, but the moment one crab tries to climb out and says, "Hey, I think there's consensus here. I think there's an important belief that we can build mutual knowledge that we all agree and we should shout it to the world," everybody pulls him down and says, "Wait, hold on, hold on, hold on. Let me give you a trillion caveats, right? Let me write a million footnotes on your side. Stay in the bucket with us, discuss forever, never finish the discussion." And I guess in that sense, it's what people criticize about the field of philosophy, right? Like you can never win the field of philosophy. You can never get like the award where your philosophical theory is correct. You just have to like wait for other philosophers to die, and then maybe in a couple hundred years people will just forget the other philosophers and they'll just think that your claims are obvious, right? Like and that feels to be the case on Less Wrong. You just have to like let time pass and see what's obvious, but you can't just unite people because it's always going to be a crab bucket.
Yes, I that rings true for me because it's not like they kicked me out. Like I was welcome to stay in the bucket, you know? But I was like, "Guys, why aren't we leaving the bucket like to do this thing?" Like and then they just, they never say like, "We're never gonna leave the bucket. That's not our intention." But that's what happens, Like and it would have been fine if I had just been like, "Oh yes, I see. There's actually many compelling reasons not to leave the bucket," and like just, sat back down. Like I would have been welcome to stay. And then they would have been nice to me
Right.
and considered me an insider. Yeah.
So I'll give you some backstory on this because there is a personal element involved, which is I had this realization recently when I made a post of my interview with Eliezer Yudkowsky. I posted the full transcript and the video on Less Wrong, and I posted it right on book launch day, or like the night of book launch day. I'm like, check it out, guys. It's a long time Less Wrong person, myself, interviewing the founder of Less Wrong with a deep dive through rationality and all the different concepts he talks about in the book and how the public's going to respond to the book. It was like a textbook, like Less Wrong guy interviewing the book author about Less Wrong and the book, right? It was kind of like a canonical Less Wrong post to celebrate the book's launch. And I post it and I'm like, okay, yeah, it's getting some upvotes. So yeah, I got like 90 upvotes total. But the thing is that like a Less Wrong post that's like doing well and has community support usually gets like 200 to 500 points, right? So this is kind of like a lukewarm reception. Like, okay, yeah, that's kind of cool, guys. And I'm like, okay, this is a little bit disappointing. And then the next day happens, the book's launch week transpires, and I look on the front page of Less Wrong, and the post for a while that had the highest votes out of like all the posts for a few days was somebody saying, "Yeah, I somewhat like this book. That I was thinking whether it would have been better if somebody else wrote the book, but I think I'm pretty much a no on that. Like I think it's probably fine that Eliezer wrote the book, even though I disagree with a bunch of stuff." And that was like the highest voted post for a while. It got more than twice as many votes as my post saying, "Here's the interview with Eliezer, like talking about all the stuff related to this book launch." Right. And that's what made me think like, why can't I go to the Less Wrong homepage and see some kind of section where it's like celebratory of the book launch? And then to be fair, there was like a banner, like let me screen share. See how in this screenshot there's a banner here that says
Yeah.
Meetup Month? Imagine that banner said, "If anyone builds it, everyone dies," and had like one piece of text about the Eliezer Yudkowsky book. The banner didn't say like, "It's important that you read the book. We support this." It was just like very calm, like, this book is out, just like, "Oh, look, this is what we're highlighting this week. There's like a book out." So I perceived it as like kind of calm, not very flashy, but, to be fair, a banner at the top, definitely worth something. But then you scroll down to the posts, and it just looks like the typical crab bucket melee. Like it didn't look like Less Wrong is here, wanting this book to be a success. We recognize the importance of this occasion. We wish Eliezer the best. This is Eliezer's community. There were like none of that vibes on the Less Wrong homepage. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. All too familiar.
And like I said, there was a personal aspect to it, right? Because did it damage my ego that I posted on Less Wrong and I didn't even break 100 points? I mean, a little bit, but I mean, like the last 5 posts that I've done didn't break 100 points, right? So it's not like I've never felt the pain of not getting 100 points. It's more like on Eliezer's behalf and on behalf of the movement. I'm like, is there ever going to be a time when we can just stand up out of the bucket and be like, all right, world, this is our chance. And I thought this book was supposed to unite the movement, right?
I can't say I'm surprised. I mean, because of what I went through, I'm a little surprised. I thought that they would be a little more excited for, or at least like that they would want to take credit for like some of the fame of the book or something. Cause like that's something that in the past, like when there were like the first few like TikToks where somebody just totally unrelated from this community talked about AI risk, like they, everybody, all this group on Twitter would be like, oh, wow, like we're getting big in the world, but like, I think I have very detailed thoughts about it, from having like lived this for years now. And I don't want to, like I don't want to convey that without like giving everybody like where I'm where I got that. But it didn't really surprise me that they would feel a desire to be like to disclaim the book. Because that's just consistent with everything so far. I mean, like they're really, really anxious about anything compromising their objectivity. And stuff compromises the objectivity of LessWrong all the time, but it doesn't like present itself like obviously enough, usually. And they sort of start noticing it when like I think when it's like not really something that they like want to go along with. And I think like this slight rift with Eliezer is gonna widen now because there's something about it, mainly like the mainstream flavor that they don't like. And then what they say, what the people who run LessWrong, Litecoin, like what they always say is that whatever they're doing is about maintaining objectivity. There was a lot of stuff about like, could I advertise protests on LessWrong because, was that recruiting and that's not allowed? They let me post there, but then like Ali Habrika, like the head of Litecoin would like post under it something basically saying that like political speech is deceptive. And I'm like, thanks. Like, don't let me post this here and then just like malign me. But like, it just, so it doesn't really, I mean, I guess I've known about this for a long time. I don't know, possibly how consistently popular have you been? Because I imagine you would kind of, on my hypothesis, you would kind of split them. Like they'd kind of feel like they want to claim you, but you're too popular. Like,
Yeah, I rarely break into the 100 plus. I've had a small number of 100 plus posts over the years. I mean, it's tough for me to work in the less wrong environment, and I think my problem is just that my writing style is oriented toward a pretty mainstream tech leaning audience, and I just don't do the hedging. I'm just like, hey, check out this claim. I'm confident about this claim, and I don't think less wrong people like that approach. Of course, it's hard for me to analyze myself. Why didn't I get lower points? Because my posts were objectively low quality. Okay, maybe that's a factor too.
and then, I mean, Eliezer many years ago in the sequences has a post about why our kind can't cooperate, which I think still rings true. I know you linked this in the discussion.
Right, yes. We can go to why our kind can't cooperate because I think he absolutely nailed it. So let's go to why our kind can't cooperate because I think that was on full display this week. Can I search for it? Here it is. This was written in March 2009, right at the tail end of his original Less Wrong sequences, which he was writing 2007 to 2009. Which is so impressive. Like he called so many things so early, like why our kind can't cooperate. I think today it holds up so well. So I'll just read a couple quotes that I think really nail it. First, there's the anecdote. He said, I remember our synagogue's annual fundraising appeal. It was a simple enough format. The rabbi and the treasurer talked about the shul's expenses and how vital this annual fundraise was. And then the synagogue's members called out their pledges from their seats. Straightforward, yes? Let me tell you about a different annual fundraising appeal, one that I ran. And then he talks about how, like, whenever he would ask for money, everybody would immediately start arguing about, like, wait, is it really worth this much? Why don't I donate to something like this? Which is like, okay, yeah, you can have your argument, but, like, where's the show of support? Like, you guys are Eliezer fans, right? You're constantly talking about how great his institute is and the shared mission of AI. And the moment he's like, so I'm open to donations. And I was like, wow, right? It's like, there's kind of like a time and place for these things. And there's a time and place to send a signal that you're mostly positive about something.
Yes. I mean, there's so many I'm like fighting like a tide of like anecdotes and stories about my time with the rationalists about this. A big one that comes to mind is vegetarianism. They have never liked it. They've never liked that like EAs are vegetarians. There are some rationalist vegans, but it's like less of a cultural thing. And like kind of like when it comes time for like a demand or some kind of show of, or even just sort of a suggestion that they're supposed to do something that they don't want to do, like it's like it becomes very like disagreeable, and like that's really what like they all come together over, is just like being disagreeable about lots of things and kind of like being able to communicate in that way. So I guess like it doesn't surprise me that it's hard for them to come together. I should say, in fairness, I have been impressed with like the kinds of things they can come together to do. So they can come together to do social stuff. They can come together to do secular solstice, which I think is a beautiful ceremony. And it's been incredibly well produced in Berkeley in like the last several years. And they can come together for pretty advanced like conferences and for like pretty advanced like discussion stuff, forum stuff. They can really agree on like those rules of engagement, but they don't really have like a consensus about how to act in the world. And it's not really part of their philosophy. And I always found it weird that they were like hostile to EA, but it, like, instead of just saying like, I don't believe that, or I'm not going to do it, and the reaction to like protesting was similar. It's not just like, I'm not going to do it, but that's fine. You could do things, that like being like, no, like in our community, like we don't have to do things. Like we only agree on these certain things.
Just to give you one more quote from Eliezer's post about why our kind can't cooperate, with like the positive appeal. He's saying, I think there are parts of life where we should learn to applaud strong emotional language, eloquence, and poetry. When there's something that needs doing, poetic appeals help get it done and therefore are themselves to be applauded. We need to keep our efforts to expose counterproductive causes and unjustified appeals from stomping on tasks that genuinely need doing, right? So like in this case, like waking up the public. Just to finish Eliezer's quote here. You need both sides of it, the willingness to turn away from counterproductive causes and the willingness to praise productive ones, the strength to be unswayed by ungrounded appeals and the strength to be swayed by grounded ones. So I feel like that's the issue with the crab bucket or the circular firing squad, is we've lost that gear where once in a while there's an appeal so good that you want to signal, okay, we have mutual knowledge that this is a good appeal. Like we do leave the bucket and tell society something.
Yeah, it is. I think there is like a mutual agreement. Like it's not simply that the crabs like pull down whichever crab tries to leave, but it's a mutual agreement to stay in the bucket, and that there's not going to be like any pressure to put your money where your mouth is. I think that that's kind of how rationalism evolved. Like it's not always been the case with this community. Like sometimes they were more active and they like did things like found this field of AI safety. But I think if they became dedicated to like being right, and that's it. And like when you do stuff, or when you like take action because you think something matters, like you often have to sacrifice some amount of being right. Like you have to put things on the line, and they'll think that they're brave about putting stuff on the line because they'll do like forecasting bets or something. But like it's too exposing to do like activist stuff. It's too exposing to possibly be taken for saying something stupid by a stupid person who doesn't know how to understand what you're talking about. Like that's all incredibly, I mean, I've just seen again and again, like how vulnerable that is for like this group. And they really, I also like want to be right. I totally get it. It's a very strong motivation for me, but I do feel much more, I have a much stronger motivation to like save the world from this danger and protect the world. And I just thought, I don't know, I thought they did too, but I think like the strength of like, if you'd have to be wrong at all, or you'd have to give up any options, you'd have to like commit to something you're not like totally sure about, or you'd have to like, then they're like, no, and there's always a reason not to do that. There's a couple like versions of rationalism today that are articulated in this way, and like there's one strain which is popular with the light cone people, especially, which is like basically like because of nth order effects of actions, you should have the highest possible bar for doing actions. And also there's no action and action. There is an action and action distinction. Not acting is fine. And so basically that's just like you can just sit around and be right. And as long as you don't deceive anyone or like do anything like dishonorable from your computer chair, like you are good. And the minute you start to take actions, like you're opening yourself up to taking an action that has a harmful nth order effect, So there are some like articulations of this view
Okay.
in rationalism.
I noticed that Paul Crowley left a comment on this post from 17 years ago. My time flies because I was actually there when Eliezer was publishing this stuff back in 2009, and Paul Crowley was there. We saw a tweet from him earlier, so he's one of the OGs. So he writes, in this community, agreeing with a poster such as yourself, talking about Eliezer, signals me as sycophantic and weak-minded. Disagreement signals my independence and courage. There's also a sense that, quote, there are leaders and followers in this world, and obviously just getting behind the program is no task for so great a mind as mine. So, so Paul Crowley really gets it all the way back in 2000. And funny enough, he got 71 votes at the time. I wonder if he'd get 71 votes on that today, as the
Yeah.
crab buckets as the crab bucket has embedded itself in the culture. Now, getting back to the subject of this particular book launch. So remember, I was triggered to notice how bad the situation is when I noticed that my own post didn't get upvoted enough. Okay, so I'm biased. But then I went and looked, well, wait a minute. What about MIRI's book launch post? Let's go find that. Here it is. Okay, it's got 270 points after a week. When I checked it last week, it was more like 230. But yeah, this is the official release day post on the book launch day by Alex Vermeer, who works at MIRI. And okay, it got 270 points. But if we scroll through LessWrong, like what else is on there getting 200 points or similar? Okay, there's this cool short story called The Company Man that was posted after the book launch that has 541 points and one of these curated stars. Or like this post is about the rise of parasitic AI, also posted after the book was, and 537. Okay, so this is what it looks like when LessWrong is really like, hell yeah, this is good content. Now here's one that is a review of Clara Collier's review, which we said a lot of people were dunking on, including us. So that's cool that this one has 215 points. But on the other hand, why is the official post announcing the book in the same league as a post that's reviewing somebody else's review? Like there's basically no coordination to say, here we are in this community supporting the book launch. Why can't the book have 541 points like these posts got in the last week, right? It's not unusual for a post to get 537. If you combine the 200 something points that the official book launch post got, and you add to that like the 90 points that my interview got, we're still not even approaching like typical levels of stars here on LessWrong. Like why did LessWrong just let this occasion go by?
I have suppositions you will think are uncharitable. I think they don't. I think like specific individuals in charge of LessWrong and just the community doesn't want to feel compelled to take like the actions in the book, and they don't want like discussion to move that way. And then two, I think they just feel scared at the idea of committing themselves or like exposing themselves to like a general proposition like that, or just getting in a realm that they don't really understand or feel mastery of, like public conversation or working in politics. And like because you'll find plenty of evidence of that around the site, like where they'll say the reason that you can't bring this up or the reason they're all piling on is because you're encouraging like political thought or like self-deception, and that could be very contagious. And so they just can't have that. And like LessWrong, there's a lot of, especially with the book reviews, a lot of comments said things like, why can't we just have one place where we can just, say what we want, And it's like, you're saying that we have to perform because of AI
Yeah.
safety. And I'm kind of like, I think you can be disagreeable together as long as the day is long, like you can do that, but like, don't steal the topic of AI safety. That's what annoys me. Just be disagreeable, fine. Have a place where you're disagreeable, but like, don't like, that when you do that, the message you send is that you don't approve of the book, or you don't approve of activism to stop, AI danger, even though you say AI danger is so great. I'm like, either like let go of the claim to like working on this real topic and like this real important thing, or get with the program. Like if you want to be part of the solution, you have to like be part of the solution.
Yeah, expanding on what you just said, get with a program of like working on a real thing. This is actually one of Eliezer Yudkowsky's core teachings back when he was laying down the rationality foundations on a little site called LessWrong. One of the teachings is something to protect. That was the name of the post. The idea is that you don't just randomly have these superpowers that let you reason really well and you just work on them for their own sake, it's all in the service of some other thing that you value. Like rationality skills are a way to systematically go out into the world and live your life to obtain more of what you value, or to give to the species more of what you value for their future. Like to do something real, like right, what you said, something real. And the problem with LessWrong, the problem with the crab bucket is that they've kind of forgotten about the mission to get out of the bucket for certain occasions.
I completely agree. Like when you read the sequences, like a lot of that idea comes up many, many times in the sequences. And Eliezer's like moved a lot. He'll talk about how like people don't understand how he could like cry thinking about the future or like what's at risk, and like how there's many disquisitions like talking about how it's like rational to like feel emotions related to things you value and things like that. There's so much. But like you would like if you were to just comment that and people didn't recognize it from the sequences, like on LessWrong, you get like torn apart today. Like because it like that's like, well, that could compromise your judgment and like then, you wouldn't be right. Or like, oh, you're just doing this because you're so sentimental about, people's lives or whatever.
Right. Let's go to the discussion now. Let's see what people are saying. So right after I posted my interview with Eliezer and I saw the way that the front page of LessWrong was going, where random posts about other topics and even posts saying that they didn't love the book were just on this level playing field with like this huge book launch announcement, the pinnacle of how MIRI and Eliezer Yudkowsky are trying to affect the world after 17 years of this community. Like, that was just kind of getting buried or getting mixed with all these other opinions. So then I posted on Twitter, I said, LessWrong is a circular firing squad. My deep dive with founder of site and associated movement to promote his potentially world-saving book got 83 votes. Buck's quote-unquote tentatively supportive review of said book, questioning whether someone more reasonable could have written it, got 152 votes. So I'm just quoting one of the other posts, the one called I enjoyed most of IABIED, which I thought was a fine post. I just wish that the community wasn't so infatuated with posts like that so that they could take a breath and support the damn book. And I continued in my thread. I said, according to the 2 highest voted comments on my interview, I should have made it, quote, less about that one particular person, Eliezer Yudkowsky. That's what the commenter was saying. I should make it less about Eliezer Yudkowsky. And also that I made various viewers feel, quote, icky, and it was too much, quote, fawning. Sigh. Yes, I'm openly a big fan of the guy responsible for this uniquely smart movement and community. Like, yes, I am a fan of Eliezer. Yes, the interview of Eliezer's book launch was about Eliezer. Yes, I admit it. And then I say, anyway, check out my interview with Eliezer Yudkowsky. It's one of the most popular ones on YouTube. Because to me, it was mind-blowing that you can post an almost official, it's not an official Eliezer book launch interview, right? It was on my own personal channel, but it was a LessWronger on LessWrong, recapping the last 17 years on this very special day. So for me, it was just mind-blowing that I can post this on YouTube and it gets 30,000 views. People have spent over 10,000 hours on YouTube taking in this interview with Eliezer, organic views. We didn't even advertise it. And then you go on LessWrong and it's like, yeah, 80 something points just gets buried down. It's not even on the front page after a day. It's like, what the hell? So then Oliver Haberka, who's one of the founders of like the new LessWrong. So Oliver did a really great job, I think around 2014, kind of bringing LessWrong back to life after the community was kind of dying. I'm a big fan of Oliver Haberka. I think he's generally adding a ton of value and having great opinions and helping LessWrong be good. But obviously, we're disagreeing on this one particular issue. So he comes in, he says, for what it's worth, I agree with that rough ranking. Buck's review is great. Eliezer isn't that great on podcasts, especially compared to reading his essay, and not that interesting to LessWrong readers. So he's basically saying, look, you had this one post where you interviewed Eliezer, but LessWrong isn't really about interviews, and Buck's post is kind of like good LessWrong material that we want to discuss, so that's fine. Which, look, I understand his perspective, right? If you're just asking the question of what does upvoting mean on LessWrong, and you define it to mean content that people on LessWrong want to read right now because it's like stimulating to them right now, then yes, they don't necessarily need yet another interview with Eliezer, unless of course you're looking at this dark matter of like all the newer LessWrong users who actually haven't read the sequences that much. They've only read some of them and they actually do want an interview with Eliezer. But like putting that aside, right? If you go to all the highest karma users, okay, maybe they can skip yet another Eliezer interview. So then another guy, Tyler John, is saying, link posts get fewer upvotes than original writing. And I say, I don't see why it should in this case. It's still new and original content because again, I am a LessWronger. This is kind of like an important day for LessWrong. Like, am I the only one saying this?
And they could watch it in LessWrong, right? It was embedded.
Right. It's original content. It's embedded into LessWrong. The only other place that it was on is my personal YouTube channel. It's not even on Doom Debates. And not only that, but there's a full transcript on LessWrong. So it's like, this is fresh Eliezer content. Nathan Young is saying, Buck says he tentatively supports it. Is that really a circular firing squad? So I clarified, I don't mind Buck's post getting votes. I'm pointing out that the voting pattern for Yudkowsky and high AI risk content and awareness raising efforts is much lower than expected given the historical and presently perceived prominence of these two factors in the community. This guy named Galileo wrote, to be honest, this reads as a complaint about a cult not behaving like a cult. And then I'm like, I'm sure that's what many think as they smile in satisfaction that the post didn't get that many votes. They're like smiling in satisfaction.
Yeah, they
being
like to
look at us
reassure
not being a cult.
themselves. They get a
Yeah.
little hit of like, yes, like nonconformity, like really affirms their identity. Like, even if it is a form of conformity, like something that feels like oppositionality, like this is a very, very common personality trait of LessWrongers.
Exactly. Another interesting moment was a couple days after the book launch, and we had this discussion on LessWrong with all kinds of opinions being shared and not really much of a rallying effect. Somebody named Recurrented made a post called This is a Review of the Reviews. It got 95 points, so notably a little bit more than my interview of Eliezer. If you read how the post starts, he's saying this is a review of the reviews. It's a meta review, if you will. But first, a tangent, and then a history lesson. So, and then he goes into like, previously I rode a motorcycle. I rode it for about a year. And his point is like, okay, the motorcycle actually had a pretty high risk of death, but it's lower than the P-Dooms people are saying. And then he's also saying, I also noticed mental gymnastics in people's book reviews. And it made me disappointed and almost not wanting to say anything. I think it's virtuous to note disagreements. So blah, blah, blah. End of the post, he's saying, it worries me that people who allegedly care about the future going well and are also at least 5% concerned that AI is not going to go well are also squandering opportunities to help wake the world up to the dangers that they themselves are seeing, even if they see them slightly differently from the authors. So I completely agree. This is very similar to my crab bucket observation, but he's getting 95 points on LessWrong. And people aren't having that same reaction of, if I upvote this, that means I'm conformist. It's more like, yeah, that's a good observation because you're arguing with people who are arguing with the book. I like that, right? That's how you have to package it.
And like the quote you read, like the less readable it is, like the less memeable it is, the more they like it. Like they can sense if something is like too easy to get or too easy to like. I have an inner sense of kind of what is going to play with that crowd well or not. And it has to like feel, my belief is that they're very nervous about somebody like coming away with the wrong impression. Like, not because they care about that person understanding really, but because like they want to be understood. And they're really nervous that people are not really going to understand them. They're just going to pattern match them. And so they have to like make things difficult to access in the first place, and they have to make it so that you can't, like, Scott Alexander is like always flipping out because a journalist quoted him in a way that he doesn't like, and he considers like to be like such a violation. And you know, like this is like a long saga with Scott Alexander, and like this is always the thing that they have with journalists, like, and I think they feel safe and they don't like somebody coming into their conversation where they have that safety that like there's a guarantee that like the other side is required to like follow these rules and like listen to them, and they're going to be punished if they get it wrong and stuff. And they don't like any other style of conversation, especially the kind that could possibly reach other people, like be intruding into that space is my take on it. And so like somebody can take your same content. It's not really about the content, you know. It's like they can take your same content, and if they put it in a like, yes, I'm going to like quantify all my uncertainty. I'm going to put an epistemic status. I'm going to have a long unrelated story, but that feels like it's like more data that's being given to the reader to like understand themselves in their own way. And like, you know, like that kind of like puts them at ease enough to like take in a message and then say that they
right.
like it.
You have to wrap it up in these layers of packaging, and then they look at the post. It's like, oh, I guess I'm ripping into these layers. Look at all this nuance, all this wrapping paper strewn around me. I have now unpacked the nuance. Oh, and there is a little bit of a point here. There is a little bit of a takeaway that this book is an urgent warning to the world. Okay, I'm ready to receive it now.
It's like the love of parables, like, definitely strikes me that way. Like I love Eliezer, you know, I follow him on Twitter, but like when I open up his like long tweet and it's just like how long and how much do I get to know these characters before I can understand your point? Like I but I kind of get it. Like it's clear like that mode of discussion evolves again and again. And like now I kind of think like, oh, like on LessWrong, you kind of have to like get people comfortable, like have them like distracted a little bit on a story to kind of like be able to they want it to be earned. Like, you can't just give your conclusion, like it needs to be earned and it needs to feel like all of their thoughts kind of have to be somewhat addressed like, oh, but like what percent? Surely not anybody who thinks there is a chance of doom because you could have a really small chance of doom. Like, they want all of that to be like anticipated, like, yes, this post is for you, like the kind of person who thinks this way.
Let me show you another bank shot that got LessWrong readers to upvote a pro book post. The first bank shot was the guy I showed you who's saying, I'm reviewing all the reviews and I'm sad that they're not more pro the book. Here's a post by Max Harms, who actually works for MIRI. Smart guy. His post is titled Contra Collier on IABIED. So remember Clara Collier, she wrote that review that seemed like a low quality review. So here's somebody from MIRI saying, I disagree with this review. Let me explain why this review is bad. And again, a disagreement post about a disagreement review about the book, that bank shot is more interesting to people or gathering more upvotes than just a straightforward launch day interview with Eliezer Yudkowsky, original content from a LessWronger. No, that's not interesting LessWrong content. A review of somebody else's review criticizing that saying the book is bad. That is how you do it. So I said, yes, this is the way to get LessWrong to upvote a post that supports Eliezer Yudkowsky's latest and most important work. Step 1, have someone else attack it with a bad argument, Clara Collier. Step 2, attack their attack. Well done, Max Harms, seriously. And I meant it. I'm like, you did it. You cracked the formula. And then Oliver Habrika, I don't think that he fully understood that, like, I meant it, that well done really is well done. He says, I don't understand this tweet. What is up with you being weirdly aggro at anyone getting upvoted? Obviously, the key difference between this and your content is that it's a completely different form factor and aimed at a completely different audience. And it's not even super upvoted. Max Harms' post with the 116 upvotes. It's not even that upvoted. It's like reasonably popular. Also, I don't know, this tweet feels like it's just contributing to bad polarization. Max's post is pretty good. Why would you attack him for writing it? I am glad people are responding to critiques, and Clara is definitely someone whose critiques are worth responding to. So then I said, I think it's sad in an our community can't cooperate way that LessWrong isn't upvoting Eliezer book launch content. The large community of people who haven't already become 250 plus hour sequences readers could benefit from a natural, timely entry point. I don't have a problem with the other posts, right? So like some people misunderstood that I'm like hating Buck and Max Harms for writing these posts. It's like, no, those posts are fine. I just wish that there was some kind of big community support thing. And I know there was a little banner, right? I know they put up a banner that said like, this book is out. I know that, but I would have liked to see more, and I would have liked to see it come more directly from an aggregation of the community and not 100% of the community. I would have been happy if like 60% of people engaging in the front page would show their support, or I would have even been happy if like 40% showed their support and the other 60 are like, sorry, we're not ready to fully support it. And there was just like this very important 40% segment.
It's just a missing mood. Like, there's no
right, the missing mood of
anyone
support,
is kind of like, yes, like, I'm so excited for this book and what it's going to accomplish. Like, it just, there's really nowhere, like even, I'm sure even the MIRI, but I haven't read the book announcement on LessWrong, but I'm sure it's kind of like, we are modestly excited for our book, like that's because that's how you got to do it. And so like, yeah, it's just a missing mood. Like, it's not that other people are getting love. It's like there is a mood of like, oh yeah, like let's get into it, like these criticisms of the book or whatever. But there isn't like, yeah, like let's savor that like Eliezer like is doing this new thing and like this is so cool and I'm excited to like tell my family or be the insider who has like relative connections to this whole world. Like that's all clearly missing. And like you're pointing at like one instance that they're like, this is an example of it. Yeah.
There's another piece of this puzzle that I'm confused about. So it's like, I think we all have a good grasp of what the LessWrong old timers like, the people who get high karma themselves and write these long nuanced posts, and like when other people like write long nuanced posts. we have a good read on them, and we have a good read on this idea of like the general public and whether LessWrong can successfully signal to the general public, and the general public likes to respond to pretty crude, straightforward signals. I think we're on the same page there. But what about the newer LessWrong users? Because it seems to me like the median user of LessWrong isn't an old-timer. It stands to reason that it would be somebody who joined in the last few years, probably in 2023, when AI started getting much more attention. That's probably where the curve averages out, right? If you're taking like the integral of all the users, I'm guessing 2023 is like the median time to join LessWrong. And somebody who's joined in 2023, they probably don't have 250 hours of reading Eliezer the way a lot of these old timers do. So if they're new to LessWrong, they're interested in Eliezer, they haven't read that much Eliezer, isn't this kind of post the kind of thing that we want them to be checking out?
I don't know this level of detail about like what kind of new users there. It certainly doesn't seem to me like they like want broad usership from LessWrong. Like I think they would say like at Lycombe that they're focused on like quality of the community first. And that might mean being like kind of unhospitable to new users. I don't know.
Right. So basically I saw a failure of signaling both internally and externally. And there's only two ways to explain it. So number one is, okay, it's a failure of signaling because the community is divided. There's not that much unanimous support for Eliezer's book. Like that could be one explanation. I suspect that's not the case. I suspect there's probably more than 50% support of karma-weighted users of thinking that this book is making a positive impact and like wish that it would get more eyes on it. That's what I suspect. But that is one plausible explanation. If it's like, nope, only the minority of the community supports it. But the other explanation is like, nope, everybody supports it. There's just a lack of mutual knowledge, which was, by the way, that's the topic of Steven Pinker's new book. He just released a book that's all about mutual knowledge. So there is like a funny connection that's like, okay, well, here on LessWrong, one of the most rational places, it seems like we're passing up this golden opportunity, this Schelling point, which is another concept that Pinker touches on, this Schelling point right when the book launches to signal mutual knowledge so that we all know, a lot of us, most of us know that most of us know that most of us know that this book is a big deal. And also when the outside world takes a look, it's like, ah, yes, LessWrong thinks this is a big deal, right? So that just seems like it should happen.
Yeah, I think about obviously not this exact thing since the book just came out, but I think about this dynamic every day since 2023.
If the failure mode is not that the community itself is divided, if the community itself is united, then we've got a failure mode in the aggregation of the site. And it could be intentional. It could be, look, we do not want the site aggregating people's opinions into this outside the crab bucket signal. That's not what we're here to do. Like, there's different reasons why there could be a failure to aggregate people's opinions. But the problem that I see is if LessWrong is not going to aggregate people's opinions, then who is? Because we don't have another MIRI-pilled rational community. This is it.
I do believe that they would tell you like how mutual knowledge works. And Schelling point is one of the most popular words, in this community. So like they know what it means. Which leads me to conclude like they don't want to, that's why. And I think they would say like they would sort of agree if you gave them this example like 10 years ago. They would have known that the answer would be to support it. But I think when it comes down to it, they're just for like personal reasons, like it's just they're too like squeamish about it. So you get kind of explanations that like, oh, you get just like what we saw. I mean, from like Haberka, it's like, well, like in this case, this is explained by the form factor of these two posts.
So to Steelman and Haberka, right, as I was doing before, it's like, if you're just really committed on this invariant, that votes on LessWrong mean what these voting readers want to read more of for the purpose of like their own education and entertainment and information, then it makes sense that an Eliezer interview didn't get voted, right? But it just seems like that there's an aggregation function missing, right? Voting is one type of aggregation. I'm just not seeing another aggregation where there's no climb out of the crab bucket aggregation.
Well, the closest thing I think is these like assurance contract type things or like, ways in which. And it's telling like what that changes is that like, people don't have to become early adopters and be like visibly different, until there's like a sea change. And so like people tell me, a lot of rationalists tell me that that's what I should do with protests, for example, like that they shouldn't have to join when it's like cringe and small. And the decision should like already be made before they have to like make stick their neck out. But I don't even know if like that's the situation with LessWrong. Like I don't know if anybody would really think it was wrong of LessWrong to just like have Eliezer content featured or like make a bigger deal about the book release or like, I don't know, like have an event where they solicit posts for, about if anyone builds it, everyone dies, or things that would be supportive, or if they had somehow rewarded like actions that were supportive of the book or something like that. Like, and to my knowledge, they didn't do any of that other than the banner. But so like,
Yep.
I don't think anybody would have thought it was like not their right. Like LessWrong, the team like does like sponsored and themed content all the time. Not sponsored, sorry. They don't do like outside sponsors, but they do like, they are having a conference at Lighthaven. Like they will put that up on LessWrong. They don't think that like, bias is it. So in this situation, like, I don't know. I feel like just based on my knowledge of the people working there, that it was probably more of like in the moment, it was like a squeamishness thing. Like, this feels like too partial, or like, I don't like the way this looks, or this is kind of committing me to this idea. I don't want that to be like visible. I don't like inviting sort of the outside world into my little
Well,
walled
no,
garden.
no. I mean, no. I actually think Oliver is correct. Where the reason my Eliezer interview post didn't get that many votes is because a lot of LessWrong readers had the same reaction as you did, of like, oh, this is cool, but I'm not going to watch it, and I'm not going to upvote something that I don't personally want to spend my time watching.
I mean, seems fair. It's just, but as you're saying, I mean, it's like, isn't that a little bit of a like LessWrong viewership issue? And then like, I don't know, I'm not saying they had to, but I mean, it's just kind of curious. Like, it seems like a book launch is like a good opportunity to have events and accompanying stuff on a forum, and they didn't see fit to do
Right.
that. And
I think that in most communities, they would kind of get the hint of like, oh, I should upvote this post because I support Eliezer Yudkowsky. I support if anyone builds it, everyone dies. I think this is a critical moment. This is an important event. And so as kind of basic signaling 101, I am pro this post. So let me just throw it an upvote, even though I'm not even going to watch it, right? So I think that dynamic would have prevailed in many communities. I think it's fair to say, look, this is LessWrong. A vote is sacred. A vote must only mean content that I personally will think is worth my time to watch. If you want to maintain that invariant, fine, okay? So I don't have to make this personal like, no, Liron Shapiro's post needs vote. I'm willing to look beyond that, okay? Keep my posts at 80 votes or whatever. That's fine. I'm just noticing that there is just a lack of some sort of aggregation, right? So even if my post got low votes, I really wish that the front page of LessWrong would just send a clear signal that there's a high amount of support for the book.
I mean, yeah, I guess, yeah, I'd take that even like beyond like LessWrong per se. I wish these people really wanted this book to succeed and saw that as something important to do. But it seems like when it comes to their image, like in the community that they care about, that they don't want to do that. Like they want to avoid that. They kind of make excuses for like why they're not doing that. And it makes me think that they don't really put the actual like world-saving aspect of their favorite thing to talk about like very highly, in their considerations.
There's one more chapter to this saga, which is I tried to do a statement of support. And this is modeled after the famous Center for AI Safety statement on AI risk, which I say it often on my show. It says, mitigating the risk of extinction from AI should be a global priority alongside other societal scale risks such as pandemics and nuclear war. When I saw this statement come out with all the signatories, I was like, holy crap, this is a mutual knowledge breakthrough. This is a game changer, right?
Yes. I mean, I use the case statement every week, how in like a communication, it's a very quick shorthand to be like, and everyone knows, like everyone, people have
Right.
agreed. And it's really like this strategy of getting people on the record of saying stuff. It's amazing too, like even without having to like whip it out again and say like, but you said, or like, but a lot of people say, like, it just really commits people to like this. They might say that they believe a lot of things at any given time, but if you really you sign your name to this and you're saying I can be held accountable to this later, it changes how you see it. And I do like with what we're talking about with kind of the missing mood on LessWrong and that whole like community, like I think they don't want to sign a statement that says I was really into if anyone builds it. I think they're sort of wanting to maintain that option value. And I think like why?
Strategic ambiguity.
Yeah. I think why? Why do you need to maintain that option value? Like why? What's going on?
Yeah. So with the case statement, For viewers who have been living under a rock, there's a bunch of prominent signatories: Jeffrey Hinton, Yoshua Benjo, Demesis Habas, Sam Altman, Dario Amodei, and it goes on from there. It's really a broad swath of people. And so you can divide the timeline into like before and after 2023, right? Before 2023, you could be like, AI risk is this niche thing. It's not taken seriously. Anybody who cares about it is a freak. It's fake. They just want attention. And then after 2023, it's like, really? Look at the statement. How do you have a statement like this if it's true that nobody takes it seriously? It's insane. I mean, people will still try to make the case. Don't get me wrong. But I just point to the statement and I'm like, I will not discuss this further.
Yeah, well, I mean, true, because, yeah, like, to make even clearer what you were describing, like, often, like, people nominally were arguing about the object level claim, but really we're arguing about, like, the warrant to even take a position on the claim. And something like the case statement just abolishes that argument. It's like, definitely we can. Like, that's decided.
I saw a strong analogy because if you talk to me in early 2023, there would be a lot of people saying, look, of course all these researchers take it seriously. Remember that time when this one guy said this, or like he argued against somebody else that was anti-AI safety, right? So people would always point to all these anecdotes, and it was quite a mess. And then after the statement, it's like, oh, okay, wow, this has really risen in prominence. This is very significant. So similarly with Eliezer's book and Nate Soros, people are saying, oh, yeah, there's all this discussion happening on LessWrong. And people explicitly told me, they're like, look, why would there be so much discussion around it if it wasn't important? And I'm like, that's your idea of signaling? Like that there's a lot of discussion around it? Like, we just need a statement where people build mutual knowledge. Because the problem with not having mutual knowledge is, okay, maybe I personally know that a bunch of people are into the book, but I don't even know that other people know that those people are into the
And
book.
those
And
same
they
people
certainly don't. Yeah.
are not necessarily going to say the same thing in 2 years that they said was obvious, and there was no
Right, they might
need to
change their
affirm
mind. They
it.
might say different things to different people. I mean, mutual knowledge is a thing. Look at Stephen Bigger's latest book, right? The thing about these kind of public statements is that now everybody knows that everybody knows that everybody knows. Like, there is this cascading effect. Like, it is powerful for mutual knowledge to be a thing. I do think this falls into the blind spot of a community like ours.
I think there's still ways in which they do, there is mutual knowledge about certain things that people in the community are really into. And I think they have withheld it from this book. And like that's a statement. There's something about they don't want it to be like written that they really supported this. I think they're unsure of like how things are going to go societally. I think they're also like unsure of how things are going to go. Like, are they going to continue to identify with this community? Like, if what the community does is different, if it's more public facing, if that's like,
Are they going to be part of the post-singularity governance?
yeah, like, are they somehow going to be like excluded from like still working on AI if they want to do that or something like?
That's one hypothesis, but I wasn't so quick to conclude that they're withholding their mutual knowledge, because I figured, look, maybe this is just like the situation in 2023. If you look at all of these experts in the AI field, they weren't exactly withholding their support for the field. It's just nobody had organized them together into signing a statement. So I took a stab at it. I went on LessWrong yesterday and I posted statement of support for if anyone builds it, everyone dies. And of course, I had to have the preamble, right? I wanted to increase my chances of success. So I didn't want to go right into it. I wanted to explain the concept that I'm building mutual knowledge. I said, the purpose of this post is to build mutual knowledge that most of us on LessWrong support if anyone builds it, everyone dies. Inside of LessWrong, not every user is a long timer who's already seen consistent signals of support for these kind of claims. A post like this could make the difference in strengthening versus weakening the perception of how much everyone knows that everyone knows ... that everyone supports the book. Externally, people who wonder how seriously the book is being taken may check LessWrong and look for an indicator of how much support the book has from the community that Eliezer Yudkowsky originally founded. The LessWrong front page, where high voted posts are generally based on, quote, whether users want to see more of a kind of content, unquote, wouldn't by default map a large amount of internal support for IABIED into a front page that signals support. What seems to emerge from the current system is an active discussion of various aspects of the book, including well-written criticisms, disagreements, and nitpicks. So here is the statement of support. I support if anyone builds it, everyone dies. That is, I think the book's thesis is likely, or at least all too plausibly right, that building an artificial superintelligence using anything remotely like current techniques, based on anything remotely like the present understanding of AI, will cause human extinction. I think the world where the book becomes an extremely popular bestseller is much better on expectation than the world where it doesn't. I generally respect MIRI's work and consider it underreported and underrated. And then I have a little section at the end where I say similarity to the Center for AI Safety Statement on AI Risk, where I explain what we just went over. The famous 2023 Center for AI Safety Statement on AI Risk reads, mitigating the risk of extinction from AI should be a global priority alongside other societal scale risks such as pandemics and nuclear war. I'm extremely happy that this statement exists and has so many prominent signatories. While many people considered it too obvious and trivial to need stating, many others who weren't following the situation closely or are motivated to think otherwise had assumed there wasn't this level of consensus on the content of the statement across academia and industry. Notably, the statement wasn't a total consensus that everyone signed, or that everyone who signed agreed with passionately, yet it still documented a meaningfully widespread consensus and was a hugely valuable exercise. I think LessWrong might benefit from having a similar kind of mutual knowledge building statement on this occasion. So that was my post. All right, what did the LessWrong community say? Any guesses?
Well, I already saw.
All right, we are currently standing at 24 points, but the funny thing is it's 24 points from 39 upvotes. So
You and I both strong upvoted it, so
you start out. Yeah, exactly. That's pretty funny. I mean, if you compare it to like a random post on the front page, like this one that has 83 points, this one has 83 points based on 30 votes. So I have more votes than this post that has 83 points, but you can tell, there are probably people strong upvoting and strong. So it's like this would rank as a controversial post. Let's be fair though, okay? It's controversial because people are confused about whether this kind of post is something they want to see again, right? So they're not necessarily saying Eliezer's book sucks, okay? So it's not necessarily, that's not what it represents. Let's be
what's
generous
wrong
here.
with this post? It just like
Yeah, so maybe the comments will tell us what's wrong with this post. So Buck has the highest voted comment that relatively a lot of people agree with. I guess about 10 people agree with it roughly. He's saying, first he was saying that my original, I had a different phrasing of my statement of support. Originally, I'd used the language, the book's thesis is basically right, that if anyone builds super intelligent AI in the next decade or two, it'll have a terrifyingly high, let's say 15% plus chance of causing everyone to die in short order.
You can't leave a hook out like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I left the hook out. So this, and I did rephrase it after Buck's comment, but he said, I think this is an absurd statement of the book's thesis. The book is plainly saying something much stronger than that. How did you pick 15% rather than, for example, 80 or 95%? And look, it's a fair point, right? That I picked 15. The book was making much more stronger statement. I mean, my intention with my statement is to be like, if you think the correct value is 15%, you should probably still be a supporter of the book. So I was kind of trying to draw a boundary there. But anyway, I agree that he's at least right to criticize that this is probably not an ideal statement. So I did rephrase it. So I told him, look, I've updated it right now. I'm just saying I've used the book's own language, building an artificial and super intelligence using anything remotely like current techniques based on anything remotely like the present understanding of AI will cause human extinction. So I changed the language. And then what else was Buck saying here? He's saying, I'm basically on the fence about the statement you have made for reasons described here in this other post by somebody who works with him. He says, I think P of human extinction given AI takeover is likely 30%. And I separately think P of AI takeover is like 45%. Okay, so he's on the fence, but then he's saying that it's probably right about what I said about the world where the book becomes an extremely popular bestseller is much better than expectation. He says it's probably right, but it's unclear. Okay. And then finally, with the thing about I said about I respect MIRI's work, I mean, maybe I should have just taken that out. It's like, because this is bringing in, like, I guess, additional assumptions. It would have been simpler for me to take out. I generally respect MIRI's work and consider it underreported and underrated. But to me, when I wrote it, I was just thinking, isn't this implied by supporting the book that like MIRI's build up to this point has been very important and underrated? But whatever, I should have just taken
whole world, like professionally. So it's like,
right. It's
everything he thinks about all day is like in this, like, map of ideas, and like MIRI's over here and he's over here, but like.
Right. So to be fair, he says, it depends what you mean by work. I think their work making AI risk arguments at the level of detail represented by the book is massively underreported and underrated. Okay, I'll take that. And he says, Eliezer's work on making a rationalist and AI safety community is very underrated. I think that their technical work is overrated by LessWrong readers. So you know what? I don't actually want to nitpick Buck. I actually think Buck has like a fine comment, right? And I think Buck's comment is fine. I don't think that it undermines the post. I think it's just like a fine, almost tangential comment.
I guess. I mean, I'm still kind of thinking like, okay, but if you like really cared about getting this message out or like being clearly understood on where you fall in this book, and you at all were like taking into account the costs of people not understanding that you support it to the level that you do, instead of only taking into account the cost of people thinking you agree with it where you don't, then like I think you wouldn't be equivocal. Like, I don't know, maybe he'd be like, I can't do this because professionally it might confuse people about my professional positions or something. Like, but like, even so, I mean, just because like you can have a question about it, or like, it's just like when you choose to bring up objections, all very indicative of like how you're like weighing the costs and benefits like underlying. And it is like a common like LessWrong rationalist thing to treat like no nitpick is too small. Like there's not real, and it's almost considered like bad thinking to weigh like the thrust of like and of arguments such that you would like overlook a nitpick. But I think that they wouldn't do it if they really, really valued the aim. And I think they wouldn't do it in their like, I don't know, I think it's Eliezer puts it this way, but like the cognition you use to go pick up milk at the store, like they're not using that.
Yeah.
They're using like social cognition to like make this decision rather. And Eliezer would say that was wrong,
Yep. All right, so let me just read you the second highest voted comment. It's 22 votes, and this is kind of interesting. It has 13 votes, so slightly controversial, I guess. So it's a guy named Garrett Baker, and I think this comment is actually representative of the community reaction. This comment probably gives you a good sense, in my opinion, of why people weren't loving this post. That's just my guess. So the comment says, I don't think LessWrong is the right venue for this, or really, I don't want it to become that venue. I basically agree with Stephen Burns here, but generalize to also include rallying others to agree to stuff. I think it's reasonable to make a post arguing that people should publicly declare their stances on such things. So there was actually a pretty popular post that even quoted one of my discussions in Doom debates. This was a few days ago. There's a pretty popular post saying safety researchers should take a public stance. So it's kind of funny. It's like the community is like, oh, somebody is saying that people should take a public stance on their beliefs. Yeah, great idea. Yeah, let's upvote a post talking about the general concept of that, right? But then when the actual object level opportunity comes up, statement of support for if anyone builds it, everyone dies. It's like, I can't support this.
You're close to groupthink.
So Garrett Baker is continuing. I think this sort of thing skirts too close to groupthink. Further, I don't know what it means to quote unquote support a book. Does the book need help? How can that be? It's a book. See also ethnic tension and meaningless arguments in particular. So he's quoting Scott Alexander from a different post. We're saying, a question, are you pro-Israel or pro-Palestine? Take a second, actually think about it. Some people probably answered pro-Israel. Other people probably answered pro-Palestine. Probably very few people answered, huh? What? And he's just talking about how like, arguments can be meaningless. But then when I clarified that later, it turned out that like all he meant was that it was meaningless when I said, I support if anyone builds it, everyone dies. But when I pointed out that I was just using it as a shorthand for what I wrote right below it, which was like, I explained exactly what I meant by that. It was like, yeah, of course, the long thing you wrote is meaningful, but I support if anyone builds and everyone dies is meaningless. And I'm like, okay, well, it's the shorthand. So I hope this clarifies. Yeah.
I like Garrett. Like, I don't want to be too hard on him, but like, is he really saying like a book is an object? Like, what is it? It doesn't need support. Like,
yeah, I mean, look,
that's really weak.
Yeah, I thought it was weakly argued. And the only reason I'm even reading it is just because I don't see another post in this entire comment section, which to be fair, only has like a handful of comments in it. I just don't see any other post that explains the deal better than this post. And then he continues, I know you clarify what you mean by support later. And of course you are committing a much smaller sin than the religious person in the example. But if someone said the statement of support you outline, what they're literally saying is meaningless. The statement can only be understood in the context of a political game they're playing with the rest of society. And then I think this last statement is significant. Now, that political game may be necessary and useful, but I'd rather LessWrong not be a battlefield for such games and remain the place that everyone can go think, not fight. So then I have a reply to that, this idea of think, not fight. I said, aggregating people's existing belief states into mutual knowledge, that seems like good thinking to me, part of the infrastructure that makes thinking more effective at climbing the tree of knowledge. Right. So I just think that when people say, okay, yeah, we do support this. This is actually a piece of knowledge we think we have. To me, that's part of thinking, not fighting.
He seems to have already decided it's political. So like, I see where you're going. If you know what we think, then it'll become political. But like, the thing that kills me about LessWrong is like the idea that it's not already political. Like, I do believe, I think like the core LessWrong users tend to be very deficient in understanding like frames. They just don't, they're not very good at noticing them. If they get the sense that maybe there is some kind of manipulative frame, they like really react really strongly and like they don't really know how to like engage with it. It's a thing that there's a lot of discourse on LessWrong about this mysterious stuff, frame control. And they believe that there's this like such a thing as like entering political thinking. Like, they are not doing it. They believe that they are like not doing it. And they think that they're doing it by staying like off of certain topics and by like not talking in a certain way. And they think they're entering political thinking when they are agreeing too much, that is one thing that kind of makes them think that's happening. And they think that trying to accomplish something often is political thinking if that thing is not science. But they don't realize like how political they are all the time. Like their identity as LessWrongers, their belief that this is where we think, that is all, it's all political thinking in the same way. But they're very insensitive to it. Like they have kind of stuff that it's not perfectly overlapping with, but it is very close to the amount of the stuff they just don't want to do anyway or like feel uncomfortable with. But like or they think some other group is going to be better than them or like win the argument if they do it that way. But a lot of it is just, I think, like they begin to think like, oh no, like I like this person, like, or they're attractive. And so I might be inclined to agree with them for reasons that are not true. That pings them as like, that's like political or halo effect kind of thinking. But they never think to themselves like, I'm tempted to just disagree and nitpick and tear this apart. They think like, yes, that's good. Like that reassures them that they are doing the right thing and they're not doing political thinking. But like that can absolutely be political thinking. Absolutely. I mean, it can be bad in the same way. And I think that Garrett's comment was displaying that like, as long as we're not agreeing, as long as we're not rah, 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 like that means that we're thinking like without this influence, whereas like, I think like, why do you feel the need to tear it apart? Why does it feel wrong to support it? What are you
Exactly,
worried
which is
about?
why Eliezer back in 2009, he does do a good job of anticipating so much. He's like, by the way, you don't want to get into this mode where you just can't show your support for stuff. So I think he called it.
Yeah.
All right, so to end the saga here, this is really where things stand right now. There was a tiny little movement on Twitter when I was tweeting about how I posted this statement of support. It picked up a tiny bit of steam where a few people retweeted it and they're like, I support if anyone builds it, everyone dies, So there was a little bit of standing up in support, but it was unfortunately, the farthest thing from going viral. And similarly on LessWrong, we basically saw the extent of people's reactions to it. It's like, okay, yeah, I got some controversial up and down voting, and like I think it's done. I just don't think we're going to see a bigger push from the community.
No.
I think we're seeing some interest from the larger world, but just, I think we're kind of seeing the shape of where this is going. Like it was a bullet that got fired, it attacked the situation a little bit, but it seems to kind of now the momentum seems to be dying down, right? Is that your perception?
Well, I think it will. So for our events, like we're doing like discussion events that are happening on October 4th, 5 to 8, Manny's, San Francisco.
Okay, nice segue. I'll take that.
But also there's going to be a New York event October 12th. And others, you should check out our website, which is PauseAI-us.org. And /events will take you right there. But another, like a cost, it's not just like, did this get the buzz that it should? Or like, did this reach as many people? Or did it get as high on the bestseller list as it should have or whatever? It's also like this, Nate and Eliezer, like they haven't indicated to me that they feel demoralized at all by the reception but they, they're like dealing with it on Twitter. They're like responding to people.
I will say this. A couple people from MIRI did let me know that they've known about the circular firing squad issue for a long time. And they enjoyed me documenting it, but it's not news to them at all.
Well, yeah, and like that, basically that's what I was told is like, oh, we expected a lot of this. But like, I know that it's a gut punch and we need them right now to be doing these interviews and to be like promoting this book. And the book tour was a big part of the reason to do it. And like, I feel like that, like even if the community doesn't like think about these things that consciously, like they know when they're kind of like giving their supportive energy or not.
Right. I didn't mention this part, but like it's a really good rule of thumb when you're trying to get out there with a message. Others aren't going to be more passionate than you are. And in the case of LessWrong, it's the collective you. I mean, like it or not, even if you say, oh, LessWrong is something else, it's this impartial discussion. I'm sorry, LessWrong is by far the closest thing to the MIRI community. And if LessWrong isn't showing gusto at this launch, but they're hoping, everybody's secretly hoping, I believe the majority of people, even though there's no mutual knowledge, I believe the majority of people are secretly hoping that the world embraces this book, even while this community isn't modeling what it looks like to embrace this book. And that certainly breaks my rule of thumb, which is that you can't expect the larger world to get more passionate about something than you are.
I agree. I think a lot of these people would love to be able to be like, well, I was like a slightly more sophisticated kind of AI safety person, but like, yeah, it's okay. To like be latecomers to this book, like, and better than the book, but like, it's not going to get big if they don't lend themselves to that. Which is, that's one of the things I complained about. I don't have many complaints about this book, but one complaint was that I felt that it didn't properly valorize and just discuss the necessity of standing alone if you need to. Like, you don't get from 0 to 1 without doing that. You need people who are willing to become part of the critical mass, which means people who join before there is a critical mass. Like, you need that. That's really critical. And we just absolutely do not have that from like the LessWrong community. And I think like this is what we're talking about right now, is like people not willing to lend themselves to that critical mass, kind of holding back, like waiting for things to kind of work themselves out or be more of a sure thing before they like stake their reputation on it. And we just need bravery to actually change things on this issue. And it's crazy that we can have such a high level of like understanding of the issue and a high level of agreement about the issue, and for there to still be that level of disconnect between like how you act, not even asking that much, just how do you offer your support? Like, do you, but I guess it is in another way, it is asking a lot. Like, it's asking a kind of like reputation risking. It's asking to enter like I guess a different mode than LessWrong's been in, where you're not just nitpicking all the time, but you're kind of trying to work together on something. I'm shocked, first of all, that's, I don't know. Obviously, I'm not like this. Like, I'm what they call in like the social change literature a zero, which is kind of a funny word, but like I'm a zero because I don't require anybody else around me to have adopted the change in order to do it. So the people around, I activated a bunch of ones around me, and then they can activate twos. Like, the fact that there are ones and zeros activates twos.
Yeah, I consider you a zero. but I mean, seriously, right? The way you influence me. That's a nice backhanded compliment, I guess.
I know it's hilarious, but I but yeah, I had a sociologist like write this about me, and I thought it was so funny to read. He called me a rational zero.
Yeah, exactly.
But so yeah, obviously I'm kind of weird in this way. But it is amazing to me that this is like even a question, that like, yeah, okay, maybe there's some cost to it. Like, maybe you have to like put something on the line, but like how you could not do that and I think most people in this circular firing squad, if like 20% of people were zeros on this and they were just like, of course I will support this, like, then a lot of people would fall into line, and a lot of people's true feelings about what to do or sure, like, form like a bell curve. I'm sure if they had that 20% base, then like they would fall into line too. But like, they just consider it this big deal to be expected to do anything in that uncertain position. And I think Eliezer is kind of this way too, and I think the book kind of shows that with the assurance contract march and stuff. Like, it's not saying just go out and do protests. It's saying like, if we all get the security that everybody else will show up, then we will do it. I really do hope that works. I've signed up, as I said, and I wouldn't begrudge them at all. I'd just be thrilled if that worked. I do feel like it's going to be pretty crucial that we like directly deal with this tough moral, which apparently a tough moral issue for a lot of people, of putting yourself on the line, and actually like being part of making that critical mass, rather than just like saying, if they build it, I will come,
Right. Okay. Yeah, good points. And I'll let you promote some of your events in. I think that's well deserved. Just to recap here, there is some reason to be positive here, which is, like I said before, huge fan of MIRI. I'm overall satisfied with their performance. I don't think the world needed MIRI's performance to be better. I think they did great. LessWrong, I'm kind of disappointed, but they certainly could have done worse. And overall, just like I'm a MIRI fan, I'm a big LessWrong fan. I think generally LessWrong is actually underrated. It's kind of fun for people to dunk on LessWrong. I think they don't respect LessWrong enough. I just think in this episode, we focused on something that is a significant weakness of LessWrong that I hope we do better with in the future, because it's probably the single biggest weakness. And it really counted this week. And I feel like we didn't fully come through, but we still did okay. I got it right. We didn't do that bad. And the truth is that if LessWrong was like super supportive about the book, would that mean that Donald Trump would be holding up a copy saying everybody has to read it? Would it make that big of an impact? No, probably not. Right. So at the end of the day, we got to also have some perspective and be like, LessWrong is still pretty awesome. MIRI is definitely pretty awesome. Right. So I don't want to like make this into like the biggest issue ever, but I just think it's an issue.
For me, this issue this week is illustrative of all the weeks previous, for the last 2 years.
Right.
So like
Exactly.
I think that this is like one of the bigger spiritual issues that we can deal with inside amongst people who already care and like put significant resources about AI safety. Like dealing with this reluctance to like go out on a limb to form consensus like is one of the biggest things that we can do. So it's not the same. Yeah, it's not like if we just get our act together that suddenly like Donald Trump like starts writing a peace accord with Xi Jinping, but it's a big lever that we have. And it's something that even though I try to focus on just the public and new people knowing more about this issue, I go back to the community like and the insiders, and I like feel like I can help them, and I know they have it in them to like get stronger on this. And I think that would really multiply our impact a lot if we could all have a stronger base and we could work together more effectively.
Great. So if you're listening to this and you support If Anyone Builds It, Everyone Dies, my call to action for you is go on your social media of choice, whether that's Twitter, LessWrong, or whatever other platform I'm told exists. Post something like, I support If Anyone Builds It, Everyone Dies. I do actually think it helps. I think people notice when this is happening repeatedly. And yeah, Holly has another call to action that I also think you should listen to.
My general call to action is we need to pause AI indefinitely globally until we know that it's safe. If
I
you're
agree.
interested in that, you can pursue that at the international version is pauseai.info, and you can like find your country, kind of figure out where to go from there. The US version, if you're in the US, is pauseai-us.org. And you can see if there's a local group nearby you. You could always express your interest in starting a local group, and you can get involved in our general check out our take action page. And then we've got an event for this book. The first of the series is going to be in San Francisco, and it is going to be October 4th, 5 to 8 p.m. at Manny's in the Mission. And there's going to be a large event in New York as well that involves a march, and that's going to be on the 12th. And you should check out our website, our events page, to make sure you have the details for that. And we also have other events throughout the country and also throughout Europe and Australia, if you want to check out pauseai.info's event pages or our event page. So we would love to have you at Manny's. I'll be there at Manny's 5 to 8 on October 4th to discuss If Anyone Builds It. If anyone builds it, to discuss If Anyone Builds It, If Everyone Dies. I'd love to see you there.
Great. And yeah, so for people who just want to do stuff online, like join the Discord or whatever, just because the logistics are complicated, they should just go to pauseai-us.org and join the online community, correct?
Yes. So we've got a community page and we have an events page where you can at a glance see your options. And if you're not American, you go to pauseai.info and you can sort of disambiguate from there where you should be, where your local group is.
All right, Holly, I think this was a nice cathartic session where we got to let out some of our pent-up thinking over the week. Is that fair to say?
Yes. Yes, this is an indulgent kind of conversation for me, but I need to get it out.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so maybe we'll let the next round build up and we'll circle back in a couple months. This can be a regular thing. Sound good?
Yeah. I'm sure there'll
Cool.
be something.
Awesome. All right, well, thanks very much for coming on.
Thanks, Liron.